I am happy to introduce Diana Devi, who will be sharing home with us this evening. And Devi has been in the blissful presence of spiritual masters for most of her life. As a child, Devi spent her formative years at the feet of Sri Nanda Saraswati at Ananda Ashram in upstate New York. When her guru took Mahasamadhi in the early 90s, she was embraced by the arms of Sri Mata Amritananda Mayi Devi, also known as Amma, and became a devotee. With over 20 years as a kirtan leader, she has nourished and honed a passion for mantra, sacred text, and the performance of pujas and homas for the upliftment of all beings. Despite Devi's busy schedule, she makes time to be the music director for the local Santana Dharma class for children and the music coordinator for various satsangs in New Jersey. And you can learn more about her at dianadevi.com.
Namaskar, everybody. Welcome to our final day of the program. I have to admit, it's bittersweet, you know. You go through these transformative 9 to 10 days, and it's amazing with all of its gifts and challenges, and you make it through and you make it to that final day, and then you realize, oh no, it's the final day. It won't be this intense. Like it won't be a daily thing that I can come every day and share with you the way that we have. So I am so grateful for your presence. I'm so grateful to be part of this. Grateful for Jyotima and Swaminiji for all of your graciousness and your light and willingness to embody the goddess in all of her glory. And to all of you for coming and showing me your divine faces. Just what a blessing this has been. So thank you. So we're going to do our homa, just our same thing that we've been doing these past 10 days, opening invocations, some mantras to the fire. The mantra that we'll be offering for today is a little different. And this comes out of my Guru Amma's tradition, where we initiate people into a Ganapati mantra on the 10th day. Well, down there they call it Vijayadashami, Dussehra, I believe, elsewhere. But day 9 is usually where we do what's called Ayudha Puja, where everybody puts their tools or their instruments or their books at their puja as a final offering to Mahasaraswati, who is the goddess of all those things. And they leave it there overnight. They do their puja to Saraswati, and that's part of the prasad that you get back the next day. And you take it and like you'll read a couple pages of your book, or you'll play a couple notes on your instrument, or you'll write or type something out on your laptop or in a notepad. And the mantra that we use when we collect all these things is to Ganapati, the elephant god, also known as Ganesha. Om Hari Shri Ganapataye Namaha. Om Hari Shri Ganapataye Namaha. And I'll put this in the chat once we're done with the homa so you can see what it looks like. Now, because we're offering it into the homa, we will be using swaha instead of namaha. But there's always that question, well, you know, you're dealing with offerings of music and writing and creativity. Why Ganapati? Why not Saraswati? Here's the fun thing. So Ganapati, we always like to invoke when we're embarking on something new, which is exactly what we're doing when we pick up our stuff that's been offered. It's been made new by Saraswati. She has come and she has blessed it. And so we are embarking on a brand new enterprise in our creative and mental disciplines. Also, if you add up all right, let's backtrack. Every single Sanskrit letter has a numeric designation. And if you add up all the letters, they are 51, which is the number of beads in the mala of the Sanskrit alphabet in the Kerala tradition, which is overseen by Saraswati. So at the same time, you are invoking Ganapati, Shri is Lakshmi, and then Saraswati because of the numbers. that the entire mantra adds up to. So what an amazing thing to invoke on your very last day, all of those things, and you can start your brand new enterprise. So I figured we would end with that. And again, Kerala tradition, if you go elsewhere, the traditions will be a little different. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's a lovely tradition. It's one that I enjoy participating in every year since I've been with them. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Sorry, I momentarily got lost in fond memories. So we'll begin with 3 ohms and we'll get started. Om Sri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Yaya Snigdhabangavalokanim Bhagavatim Mandasmitasremukhim Vatsalyamritavachanim Savaduram Sankirtanapanim Syamangim Madhusiktasuktim Amritanandhatmikamiswarim Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Gananam Tva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavim Kavinamupamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatahana Shrinvanotiti Siddhasadanam Om Sri Matmahaganapataye Namaha. Om Agnaye Swaha Agnaye Namah Prajapataye Swaha Prajapataye Namah Om Bhurvaswaha Tattvarenyam Bhargo devasya dhimahi धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ स्वाहा ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ स्वाहा ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ स्वाहा ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनं मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतत् ॐ स्वाहा ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनं मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतत् ॐ स्वाहा ॐ त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनं मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतत् ॐ स्वाहा ॐ स्वाहा अग्नये इदं भुवः स्वाहा वायवे इदं स्वः स्वाहा सूर्याय इदं भूर्भुवः स्वः स्वाहा प्रजापतये इदं नमः ॐ हरि श्री गणपतये स्वाहा ॐ हरि श्री गणपतये स्वाहा ॐ श्री हरि ॐ हरि श्री गणपतये स्वाहा 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 मंत्रहीनां क्रियाहीनां भक्तिहीनं महेश्वरी यत्पूजितं मया देवी परिपूर्णं ददास्तुते ॐ लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम् This concludes our final evening of the homa for our Navratri practice. Hand this back over to Yukima and Shivaya.
Thank you so much, Devi. And now to lead us in satsang is Swamini Sharadananda Saraswati ji. She is the founder and the primary spiritual teacher of Kula Kamala Foundation and Yoga Ashram located in Pennsylvania in the US. Swaminiji is also currently serving as the interim chaplain in the Multi-Faith Center at Albright College in Reading, Pennsylvania. She began offering ministry within her community about 13 years ago. Her path to ministry was activated and empowered by a growing understanding of the universal teachings of Advaita Vedanta and Tantra, her practice of yoga, and her own path of healing. The basis of her practice was and is to explore faith and what it means to be human, to be spiritual, to suffer, and to heal. With thousands of hours of advanced study in spirituality, yoga, yoga psychology, positive psychology, and Vedic counseling, Swaminiji has been honored to serve a diverse array of individuals and communities. Some of Swaminiji's early works include her authoring 2 hospital-based yoga therapy programs. And most recently, Swaminiji authored a mindfulness program, I Am Mindful for Children. An educator, a leader, and a spiritual figure, Swaminiji has provided spiritual programming at 5 colleges in New Jersey and has offered numerous workshops and conferences. She holds a PhD in anthropology and is the author of several books of poetry, most recently 30 Days. Swaminiji took her sannyasin vows on the banks of the Holy Mother Ganga River on November 5th, 2019. Swaminiji teaches and promotes many beautiful topics such as nonviolence, human rights and values, with yoga, tantra, goddess wisdom, Ayurveda, and more. And you can learn more about Swaminiji and support her ashram at kulakamalafoundation.org.
Thank you so much, Jyotima. And thank you, Devi, for yet another beautiful, beautiful homa. How fortunate are we that we get to come together so often? How fortunate are we that we have the freedom to be able to pray the way we wish to pray, inquire the way we wish to inquire, practice the way we wish to practice. How fortunate are we that we are not being told what to believe in or what to have faith in. I think that that's a very important thing for us to remember. No matter how lost or found we feel, no matter how dedicated we are to a particular path or how much we dabble here and there, we should never take for granted the freedom that we have to practice and to devote ourselves in a way that is conducive to our heart's longing and not anyone else's. When we look at Navratri and we look at today, which is called both Vijayadashami and Dussehra, what we're looking at is the victory of goodness or righteousness or grace over evil. We are looking at the victory of freedom over bondage. We're looking at the empowerment of healing rather than suffering. And we're celebrating that victory. So I feel that today, of all days, but most certainly today, we need to remind ourselves that there are actually people in the world who are not allowed to pray the way they wish to. That it wasn't very long ago in this country itself that people were not allowed to pray the way that they want to. And that even today, what is today, the 26th? October 26th, 2020, there are places in the modern world where people can be put to death, put in jail, considered an enemy of the state or an enemy of the church because they pray differently. So we should never take our freedom for granted. Holding a heart of gratitude for the ability to pray the way we wish to pray is part of our spiritual journey and part of the quality or qualities that we cultivate during that journey, that we don't take things for granted. And there is a list, a mile long, of different spiritual virtues that we can cultivate in order to make our life a happier place, make our hearts a happier heart, make our mind a quieter mind, make our path more conducive to our belief systems. You know, there's on the order of 1,000 different virtues that we can practice on a regular basis that support us in getting to that place where we feel very connected to our spirituality. But the reality is that gratitude has to start first. Like, you need to be grateful that you have the ability to practice. If we ever stop seeing the magnitude of that freedom, and then if you happen to be somebody who doesn't have that freedom, then the gratitude is that you have the awareness of the difference. So it all starts with the gratitude, and then following the cultivation of the gratitude, or the experience of the gratitude, comes the inquiry. So what does this path mean to me? Where will it take me? What will it show me? And how will it be practical and useful and esoteric and very special in my life? Does it mean the same thing for everybody else? How come there's not one answer for everybody? Why doesn't one size fit all? We get to ask these questions, and we get to ask them openly, and we get to ask them in such a way that we don't have to feel bad about asking them. Because until we understand that there is no cookie cutter spirituality, until we understand that, we will also not understand the necessity of different lives. That one person experiences certain types of sorrows in their life, and another person experiences something completely different. Until we recognize that spirituality, the experience of it in many, many, many ways, is individual, we won't be able to have a full appreciation for the path that individuals walk. We'll have a tendency to look at other people and say, well, you wouldn't suffer so much if you did it right. I know what right is because I do it right. We let our ego get in front of us. But the gratitude for the freedom to practice the way we wish allows us, on many, many levels, both obvious and hidden, to see other individuals, other people, other communities, and recognize the beautiful diversity and the necessity of that diversity. And that humbles us, because we don't have all the answers, and it's not likely we ever will, as long as we're in a human form. I constantly come back to the Baha'i tradition with regard to this, because I think that in their teaching called the Certitudes, they touch base on something that's so very important. They explain it kind of like this. They say, you know, there has never been a prophet that brought the entire truth to the world of humans. Every prophet only ever brought a part of the truth. And the part of the truth that was brought was the part that was needed, the part that would be recognizable to those who needed to recognize it. There's never been a prophet who has brought to this world, to this human world, the complete truth. They've only ever brought what was most needed. And it's only when we put all prophets together, all of their messages together, that we see the entire truth. Similarly, they said, there is no church on this earth that teaches the entire truth. Not one. Doesn't matter what tradition you belong to. Every church that is currently present on this earth, that was present in the past but is no longer here, that might be present in the future, each one will only ever teach part of the truth. And they'll teach the part of the truth that the temperament, experience, and circumstance of their followers necessitates. And it won't be until we take the teachings of all churches and temples and put them into one place and accept all those parts as being from a valid completeness, that we will see the wholeness of the truth. And then the third thing, because they take this in three parts, they say, it's the prophets, it's the churches, and then the third is it's the people. No one person knows the truth. No one person will ever learn the entirety of the truth. You'll have your insights. You'll have your awarenesses. It's only when we bring all of those insights and awarenesses into one place. It's only when we bring all people together and accept them for exactly who they are and for the experience that they are having in this life. It's only when we stop trying to convert people. It's only when we stop trying to judge people and tell them how wrong they are. It's only when all the people come together that we will see the light of the complete truth, because the complete truth necessitates all of us be present to it. Every one of us. And that every one of us be present to it in a way that accepts every one of us. So the teachings of the Baha'i are beautiful because they're all about unity. And as I mentioned, I believe it was last night, they go on to say, if you're not asking about unity, then you're really not asking the right question. Because every question that is asked that is not based in unity is based in self-interest. And that's okay, because there comes a point in time in our spiritual path where we do need to be self-interested. After all, that's what usually gets us started. We want our own suffering to stop. We want our life to be healthier and happier. We just want to be okay. So it does have to kind of start in that place. But at some point, we need to also ask ourselves the virtuous or ethical question: how does this unify us? How does this bring us closer together in the light of love, in the light of faith, in the light of unity? There's a lot of problems in the world today. So many problems in the world today. And it breaks my heart, because I see so many people suffering needlessly. Compassion has become a four-letter word, and truth has become unimportant. If we are seeking unity truthfully, honestly, as spiritual practitioners, then we are helping to manifest a world where truth will once again become a matter of great importance. And I don't mean personal truth, I'm talking about the truth. Where we can rise above petty differences, and where we invest our energy and our attention toward the alleviation of suffering. It's just really so important. So important. And so this day, this Dussehra, or Vijayadashami, it reminds me about the necessity for us to be grateful, so that becomes a fertile soil from which all other spiritual seeds can take sprout. And we can, yes, do the internal work, the necessary work on ourselves, but in the same moment, or in moments not too long from now, we can also do the external work of accepting the circumstances of the world that we live in, and then dedicating our intentions to making that a better world for all. Just as Durgama, through these 9 nights of battle, made this a better world for all. Just as Rama and Hanuman, in their battle in the Ramayana, made this a better world for all. Just as all the great warriors through time, all the great spiritual warriors were called to action in order to make this world a better world for all. And what that means is restoring the balance, protecting the Dharma, and lessening the burden of the ego. Lessening the burden of the ego. So, also known as Vijayadashami, Dussehra is one of the most important festivals in India. And it marks the end of the 9 days of Navratri and the end of the Durga Puja. And it's also believed to be the day that Lord Ram defeated King Ravana and his army in a long battle between the forces of good and evil. So we have, on the one hand of things, for the Shaktas, the devotees of the mother, we have that her battle has come to a victorious conclusion with Mahishasura and all the demons. And on the other hand, for the Vaishnavis, we have that Ram has, with the support of Hanuman and the rest of his armies and Krishna, he has defeated Ravana and all of Ravana's demons and armies. And so what we see here today is the consorting of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. Even though it appears to be 2 different battles, those battles are very much connected, just as Ardhanarishwara is very much connected, the half Shiva, half Shakti. We see that the feminine has a responsibility and the masculine has a responsibility. And because they acted in a way that was virtuous and in alignment with their Dharma, they were victorious. They were victorious. So I want to play for you just this little fun video. Let's see if I can get it up on my screen. One moment. Let's see if it gives me the option. And this tells you a little bit about what the Ramayana is all about. Here we go. Okay, so I'll go there and I'll go there. Okay, 1 second, I apologize. And I'm working on it. All right, it's almost there. I just try this one more time. And just see if this works. Okay, can everybody see that? And so now you see just the picture? Yes? Okay. All right, so this is about 5.5 minutes. And again, this is the story of Dussehra. So this is the Ramayana in short, in very short. But it's a a good look at what happened, that today is this very special day where not only for the Divine Mother are we celebrating the victory of light over darkness, of good over evil, but also for the Divine Masculine as well.
But look, what are those?
Well, those are effigies of Ravan, his brother and his son, ready to be set on fire. Because today is Dussehra, the day when we celebrate victory of good over evil. And these effigies represent evil. Well, you already know the legend of Lord Ram, that he was the eldest of the 4 sons of King Dasharatha of Ayodhya and was married to Sita. He was a brave, kind and wise prince, and everyone adored him. As he was about to be crowned king, one of his stepmothers forced her husband, the king, to send Ram into exile to a forest for 14 years and make her own son Bharat the new king. King Dasharath was heartbroken, but he granted her wish to keep a promise he had made to her long ago.
Oh no!
Sita and Lakshman, Ram's younger brother, decided to follow Ram, and the 3 of them began their exile. They met many interesting adventures on their way to the forest. They lived in the forest for many years, when one day, finding Sita all alone, Ravan, the demon king, abducted her and took her to his faraway kingdom called Lanka.
Sita was kidnapped.
Yes. When Ram found out, he set out with Lakshman to rescue his beloved wife. On the long way to Lanka, he met Hanuman.
Hanuman, the strong, powerful monkey god?
Yes, that Hanuman. He became Ram's great devotee and follower and helped him not only to raise an army, but also to fight and win the battle against Ravan.
Oh, Grandpa, please do tell me more about the battle between Ram and Ravan.
Well, Ravan was a great devotee of Brahma, the creator god. He received the nectar of immortality as a boon. This nectar was placed under his belly, and he would not die until the nectar lasted. On the other hand, his brother, Kumbhakarna, and son Meghnad had also pleased Lord Brahma and received boons.
What were those boons, Grandpa?
Kumbhakarna had wanted power over all celestial beings, but he accidentally asked for uninterrupted sleep. So he received a blessing that kept him asleep for 6 straight months in a year.
That's strange.
Yeah, Meghnad too had received a boon from Brahma, that he would never be defeated in a battle as long as he performed a special fire offering called Yagya before every battle. He had many powerful weapons and could even perform many magical tricks.
Oh, God!
During the battle between Lord Ram and Ravan, Kumbhakarna had to be woken up from his deep slumber, and it took lots of drums and trumpets to accomplish that mighty task. He was not as evil as his brother, so he tried to convince Ravan to accept defeat and return Sita to Ram. But Ravan did not listen to him. Kumbhakarna was later killed by Ram.
And what about Meghnad, Grandpa?
Meghnad used his powerful weapons to kill many in Lord Ram's army, and even succeeded in capturing both Ram and Lakshman in a trap made of serpents.
Oh, no! How did they come out of it?
It was Hanuman who sought help from Garud, the mighty eagle who is considered an enemy of serpents and is also the vehicle of Lord Vishnu, the protector god. He ate the serpents and rescued the 2 brothers.
Great!
Another time, Meghnad used his most powerful weapon, Shakti, on Lakshman, who lost consciousness.
Is that when Hanuman flew to the Dronagiri mountain and uprooted it because he got confused about which special herb to take to save Lakshman's life?
Oh yes, Tomty. You know the legend well.
And Lakshman is saved for the 2nd time.
Yes, but Lakshman has had enough. He decides to disrupt the sacred fire ceremony being performed by Meghnad and finally kills him.
Phew! Thank God.
Now Ravan was the only powerful one left in his army, and as you know, he could not be killed because...
of the nectar of immortality kept under his belly, oh no!
But Vibhishan, Ravan's brother, who had earlier joined the army of Lord Ram, gave out the secret.
Yes.
So Ram aims his arrow at Ravan's belly, and as it strikes him, the nectar spills over, and Ravan is killed.
And that is why we celebrate this day. Wow! But Grandpa, did Ravan really have 10 heads?
Well, legend goes that he possessed great knowledge, equal to the combined knowledge possessed by 10 people. So maybe those 10 heads indicate that. It is also said that he had 10 very evil traits in him, like anger, greed, jealousy, etc. The heads could even be a representation of that.
He had so much knowledge, and yet he did something so bad. I mean, kidnap someone?
Yes, that is one of the lessons we learn from this story, that when knowledge and intelligence are put to bad use, they can be very destructive. Now, let's go home and have some sweets.
Ah, and there we have it. And so what we learn is that the divine masculine is battling during this time as well, because this world is full of what we could call demons, habits, habitual behaviors that are harmful, practices that put people in danger, that harm the freedom of others. Not only to live a good life, a simple life, to love the way they want to love, to pray the way they want to pray, to be the way they want to be, to dress the way they want to dress. There are so many forces in the world right now that impose suffering, that it takes both the Divine Mother and the Divine Father in order to quell those tendencies and bring things to a new balance, a new balance. So today there is a tradition in India that is the burning of the effigy of Ravana. And some areas in India he's called Ravan, they drop the last A. And in other areas it's called Ravana, and his name is spelled R-A-V-A-N-A. And so I just wanted to give you a little insight on this festival so that you would know what it looked like. And then just do that and go to YouTube. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen one more time, and this is a fairly short video, and then we'll get back to the conversation again. And everybody can see the black screen? Yes? Okay. And so India is known for its festivals. There's always a festival going on. Some festivals are on the smaller, simpler side, and other festivals are beyond enormous, where there are millions upon millions of people gathering. And some of you here tonight may have experienced that if you have been in India for something like Dussehra or one of the pilgrimages that often happen there. So the initial thing that you might think by seeing this video is, oh my gosh, how many people are there? But it's very common. It's very common for large groups of people to gather for these celebrations. And the amazing thing is that they're celebrating the victory of good over evil or light over darkness. And they're all there celebrating together. No matter what their lineage, no matter what their tradition, no matter what country they're from, they are all there together celebrating unity.
the people. Here come for the goods.
And so I think that the closest thing, there we go. So that's another one, right, that was on the picture. So I think that the closest thing that we have in the United States that might resemble something like Dussehra is Burning Man. Only the difference is that, you know, I'm not sure the Burning Man is about the triumph of good over evil so much as it is about having a good time and enjoying the fire. But what ends up happening after the festival is that people dance all night long. They dance and they chant and they eat and they just keep company with one another in groups. And, you know, they pray and they practice gratitude. They practice gratitude and they practice devotion. So truly a beautiful offering to humankind, a beautiful reminder. And so, you know, just again, and I can't underscore this enough, is that yes, we spend these 9 nights glorifying Ma because that's what our hearts are called to, and that's very important. But we also need to remember that there is another battle that's happening, and it is, you know, the battle of Ram and Ravana. And so the Divine Mother and the Divine Father are engaged in battle for our goodness, our wellness, on our behalf. And so one more reason to make an offering on your altar, one more reason to place flowers down or prasad or a prayer. So thinking about what I wanted to talk about this evening also, besides just, you know, a little bit of an introduction to why we take this to a 10th day, it brings me again to this conversation we had last night about process and how we talked about the actual battle itself with Durga facing these demons 2 at a time or 1 at a time is symbolic in many ways about the progression of our path, the way that we need to unfold ourselves, unravel ourselves from the tangles of an imbalanced ego. The first thing we need to look at is our preferences. You know, we need to look at the effects of bitter and sweet on our life and how we allow that preference to drive us. And then we need to look at things like confusion and self-deprecation and judgment of others. And finally, at the end of this progression of demons, the final demon, Mahishasura, we like to say it's the annihilation of the ego, but it's actually a little bit different than that, because the ego in and of itself is not bad. You know, you need to have your ego. That's what prompts you to get onto your spiritual path. So what it is that it is the annihilation of the violence within the ego. It's the annihilation of the violence and the harm that the ego can cause. And so we're actually retraining our ego to be kinder and gentler and to be more humble and more sincere in its spiritual quest versus, you know, out for power kind of a thing. And then we also talked last night about how if we look at the qualities of the different goddesses that showed up during this battle, we can see that there seems to be a sequence there that starts with showing up. You know, so you show up and you need to have certain qualities in place. Like first you need to have an inquiry. You need to recognize what's going on around you. And then you have to have the courage to face that and to face the truth of it. And then, you know, you go down the line and eventually we get to Siddhidatri, and in that moment, because we have brought forward all the necessary qualities to wage this battle and to become victorious, she's there with the gift of inner peace. She's there with the gift of the siddhis also. But the most important siddhi is the inner peace that we're brought to as a result of annihilating the violence of the ego. There's another way to look at this also. And this way that I would like to talk about tonight has to do less with the battle that we've been talking about all week and more with just our spiritual practice. I get a lot of questions from people about the purpose of practice. And typically my answer is a pretty big, long answer. But basically your practice occurs on a minimum 2 levels. It occurs externally and it occurs internally. And it's important that we know that, because the externality of our practice is important. Now, what do I mean by that? Because we're taught in yoga all the time, don't be external, go in, go in, go in. But we really misunderstand what that means a lot of time. And instead of acknowledging the needs and necessities of the world and the suffering of the world, we turn in apathetic judgment and superiority. And we say, not my monkeys, not my circus. And we don't become involved. And it's okay on one level, as long as you're not turning your back on what you're supposed to be doing, on your dharma, on your responsibility to support the alleviation of suffering in the world. So the first kind of way that our practice unfolds for us, and this is whether we're born into a tradition or if we adopt one a little bit later in life, is externally. We walk through the world and we walk through this life. And we're either harming or we're not harming. We're either being of service or we're not being of service. We're walking through the world either with hate or with love. We're walking through the world with fear or with courage. We're walking through the world with some opposites. And typically, they're a little jumbled and a little confused. One day we might be very hateful, and the next day we might be very, very much loving and caring. But there comes a moment in time where we ask ourselves, why am I acting like this? What is driving me here? And we look out into the world and we try to kind of blame the world. So maybe one of the first things that we need to learn how to outgrow is blaming the world for the confusion that exists within ourselves. It's nobody's fault if you choose hate over love. That's your choice and your choice alone. It's nobody else's fault if you choose fear over courage. That is your choice and your choice alone. It's nobody else's fault if you choose apathy over purpose. That is your choice and your choice alone. And then they might say, well, but there's people out there who behave in ways that cause me to feel hate or fear or apathy. It's like, no, there are people in the world who behave very poorly, sometimes extremely poorly, and they irritate and aggravate, and they're trying to jumble you up. They're trying to, because on some psychological level, that's giving them something, which we're not going to even go into tonight. But how you receive that is really completely your choice. If you meet hate with hate, you're going to end up with hate. If you meet fear, because you know most people who try to make you be afraid are doing so because they're afraid. So if you meet their fear with your fear, then you're only going to have more fear. Most people who try to bring you to a place of apathy are apathetic themselves. If you meet their apathy with apathy, you're just going to have more apathy. So we need to look into the outer world and recognize this. Recognize the impact of the influence that the outer world has on us, and then work with the opposites. And opposites are huge to do in Ayurveda. We talk all the time about how every single thing in this world is based on opposites. And that is really a human construct. Up, down, in, out, black, white, happy, sad, hate, love. You know, these are all constructs that we create in order to understand what we like and what we don't like, so that we can place them into preference categories. So this kind of early part of our spiritual practice, and it continues on, early part of your spiritual practice could be lifetimes, is looking out at the world and saying, what am I reacting to? What am I reacting to? You don't know how to adjust until you know what you're adjusting. You don't know how to fix something unless you know what you're fixing. You don't know how to heal the wound unless you know the wound is there. So this early part of your spiritual practice is about discovering that. And that's really what compels most of us to even begin on this yogic or holistic journey to begin with, is that we're really curious about our own suffering and why we have ended up where we are in a given moment. And then that external inquiry actually has a second part to it, a very natural second part to it, which is an internal intention. And the internal intention is, well, do I want to meet hate with hate, knowing that that's going to bring more hate? Now you sit with yourself and you contemplate, well, if I don't wish to meet hate with hate because I know it's going to create more hate, then how do I meet hate with love? How do I do that? And that's your internal inquiry, is how do I become courageous? How do I become full of love? How do I have purpose? How do I recognize my purpose? How do I manifest authenticity? How do I experience humility? How do I serve? So first we need to look out and see what's needed. And then we look in to find out how to manifest those qualities within ourselves. So I like to call that kind of the external first step. And we go through that for a really long time. Many of us for lifetimes. Because there are so many qualities. Don't forget Rakta Bija. Every time a drop of blood hit the ground, 10,000 more popped up. Every time you think you've got one set of opposites cleared up, you find out that there's another one. Because this materialized world is simply full of them. But that's nothing to become down about, because the more that you practice balancing the way that you walk through the world, so that you are walking without harm and with service, without hate and with love, without fear and with courage, without apathy and with purpose, without artificiality and with authenticity, without ego and with humility, concerned with the little s self and the little s self of others, that inevitably leads you into higher order spiritual inquiries about the capital S self of self and others. So, and sometimes they overlap, these inquiries also, but typically speaking, we really do experience this external inquiry strongly initially. It's very strong because we have such a tendency to blame, and we have such a tendency to judge, and we have such a tendency to victimize ourselves, and we have such a tendency to deny. And so we get really kind of stuck there, and maybe we do some really great work in the area of being harmful versus, being of service, but we still are working on our issues with mom and dad, or our issues with trust, or our issues with guilt, our issues with self-worth. So we really do have a psychology that we need to work on consistently. But in some moment, something opens up and we say, well, okay, I get it. These practices are for walking through this world because that's really practical. I'm alive here. This is my human body and my human experience. And so these questions all have to do with that. But there's something else here too. There's spirit. There's the spirit, there's the soul, there's the connection to source. And so this understanding, a little bit more of understanding about the functionality of the material world leads us toward asking these higher order questions. Okay, I get it that the opposite of hate is love, but then there's human love versus divine love. What's the difference? Okay, I get that fear is countered by courage, but there's courage in the world, which can be kind of harsh at times and can also be susceptible to the ego. And then there's divine courage. The courage to just know what's right and stay with that knowing. There's of course purpose, which is the opposite of apathy, to know that you have purpose in the world, and maybe you feel your purpose is to be a doctor or a lawyer or a mother or a father. But there's also divine purpose. And so we're inevitably led to asking these questions. What is the divine purpose? What is the divine courage? What is the divine love? What are these things? And are they accessible in this life? Are they accessible in this life? Are they accessible to me in this life? And what does that mean if they are? It's such an interesting practice because, we don't want things to be self-centered, but they have to be to some degree. So we need to constantly remind ourselves that the work that I'm doing is not just about me, but it's also about me not getting in your way. So it's also about you. And I'll say that a little bit of a different way. If all I'm ever worried about is my own awakening, I'm going to practice for my own awakening. I'm going to, whatever it is that I do, I'm going to be courageous, fearless, whatever, just for me, just for my own awakening. That's it. Then suddenly you might become an obstacle to my awakening. And if that's the case, then that mentality on my part is actually going to become a hindrance to my awakening, because awakening requires acknowledgement of oneness. Thinking that another human being or another being, period, is an obstacle to one's own spiritual path is to bring violence to the mind, because you want to get that obstacle out of the way. So there needs to be this idea of a divine service where, yes, of course, we want this liberation, this experience of moksha, this experience of the end of the samsaric cycle. But I don't just want that for me. I want it for you too. I want it for everybody. And I understand that one of the major hindrances in your path is me. And I'm willing to accept that responsibility. That if I am not disciplined within my own self, if I am not aware of what my worldly external situation is, if I am not actively working to make myself a better person, then when I come across you, you might see the part of me that is cruel and unkind and harmful. And that may impact you in such a way as to reinforce your fears, your doubt, your apathy, and your hate. So this higher order kind of spiritual question that has to do with Acknowledging the capital S self within and the capital S self in every other being is to say that selfless service is to not harm, to not get in your way, to be a support to you. I hope that's making some sense. I hope that's making some sense. So some of the, actually, let me stop there for a moment and ask if anybody has any questions or reflections so far, because I know we covered quite a bit there. So we have the externalized focus, which I know in our yoga practice we say don't externalize, but you really have to initially. And what I mean by external is that not that you're getting attached to things, but that you're looking and acknowledging what is. You're saying, wow, look at that. I really tend to be harmful when people trigger me. Look at that. When this situation arises, I really get to be fearful. Look at that. This is what happens here. This is what happens there. So we're looking at how we engage the world. And that is external in comparison to the next step, which is what do I do about it? What do I do about it? How do I change myself and my tendencies in order to stop being so invested out there and not so invested in here? Okay, I don't see any hands up. How do we effectively navigate betrayal and resentment? That's a really great question. So how do we effectively navigate betrayal and resentment? I'm going to give you an answer that was given to me once by my guru. And he said, nobody owes you anything. And I looked at him and I said, okay, that's kind of an interesting way to put it. What do you mean by that? And he said, nobody owes you anything. You own nothing, and nobody owes you anything. You would like them to be trustworthy. Are you? Completely 100% without flaw? You would like them to be exactly the person that you want them to be. But are you 100% without flaw? It's difficult because betrayal is such it's just so central to how we show up in our day-to-day life. Grounded, feeling secure, feeling safe. But the reality is that if you're looking to another human being to make you feel safe, you will never feel safe. If you are looking to another human being to make you feel loved, you will never feel loved. If you are looking to another human being to make you know God, you'll never know God. Because another human being cannot do that for you. The other human being can only ever, and I'm going to say this in a certain way, so please think about it. The other human being can only ever either give you what you want or not. So that's kind of the one side of looking at this, is to say, you know, maybe we shouldn't have expected. Maybe we shouldn't have made them so responsible for our own sense of security. Maybe we should or could recognize that they're a flawed human being like anybody else is a flawed human being. And then the only question we really need to ask ourselves and to answer is, where are my boundaries? Somebody comes and betrays you. What boundaries do you have in place? Are you willing to coexist with this person in a friendship or a relationship based on what you know about this betrayal? without it becoming a lifelong resentment. And if you are able to do the inner work, have them do their inner work, come together in the light of acceptance, then surely we can sometimes move past the sense of betrayal. But oftentimes I see that one person is doing the work, maybe not the other. And I really hate to put it this way, but in my own experience with the number of people that I have worked with, I often see that it is the woman who is pushing the work and the man who doesn't quite understand why. So she never quite feels like she can put both feet on the ground again in a stable, secure way. Because intuitively, she feels that he doesn't understand. And that's a really hard situation, because now you're talking about human love, human relationships, the concept of betrayal, the psychology of that, and the differences between the way that men and women think. I digress, so I'll come back. But so this idea of, how do we get over betrayal and resentment is to first ask ourselves, was I actually betrayed? What was it that I was looking for? And was I clear? In this relationship, was I clear with what I expected? Did I have my boundaries in place? Did I say, I expected that if we talk about something that is confidential, let's just say, that you'll honor what I'm sharing with you and not tell everybody else or anybody else. If you're not clear with your expectations, then the other person doesn't have to clearly follow them. And they don't anyway, but they really don't have an idea of what it is that you're expecting. So they don't even have the option of making the choice. And then we might say, well, they should have known better. They should, after all, right? You tell somebody something that's sensitive information, why should they go, and they should know not to repeat it. But people don't function that way. People talk because it's talking, talk. People talk. And half the time they don't even know what they're talking about. And then they come to your story and they don't even recognize that they're doing it. So I digress again, so come back. So betrayal, are your boundaries in place? Are there consequences associated with those boundaries? Do you have the courage to hold into your boundaries and to maintain the consequences for breaching those boundaries? And can you use boundaries in a way that brings about health in a relationship and not fear? And as far as the resentment goes, can we come to a place of understanding that resentment is a fire that will only burn you up inside? It won't do anything to the other person. So to hold on to resentment for another person is actually an act of self-harm, according to many, and in some psychologies as well. To hold on so strongly to resentment is to harm yourself. So can we recognize that we're doing that? And can we work toward letting go of the resentment in favor of knowledge? And what kind of knowledge? Well, the knowledge that maybe you need to have healthier boundaries, more well-defined boundaries, boundaries that actually have consequences. Maybe you need to be clear about what you expect in a relationship, not in a threatening way, but just in a friendly way. If you want to receive flowers from your husband or spouse or wife, and they never bring you flowers, you can't be upset that they never bring you flowers if you never told them that you like flowers. Because maybe they heard you tell somebody at one point in time that, oh, I really don't like getting flowers. And they took that to mean that you don't want them. Communication is a really funny thing that way. And poor communication breeds so much resentment. It really, really does. And misunderstanding too. So navigating betrayal is to ask yourself, you know, what am I learning from this situation? Where were my boundaries? Were they well established? Was I clear? Did I have consequences associated with those boundaries? Were my consequences wishy-washy? Were my boundaries wishy-washy? Did I stand with courage? Or did I let myself get trampled on? And then when the resentment starts to occur, it's, well, this resentment is only burning me up from the inside. It's not doing anything to anybody else. It's only hurting me. So maybe it's best that I let this resentment go. And that instead of resenting this person, I wish for their wellness. I pray for their happiness. I pray for their spiritual path. That if they have made a mistake and that mistake did harm me in some way, that they recognize it without me being there to make them remember. I hope that that was helpful. I hope that was helpful. Any other questions or thoughts? And I see we have some wonderful individuals who have come on with us this evening. In a few moments, I'm going to turn it back over to Jyoti, and she'll introduce the next part of our session. We have Nischala Joy Devi. I think we might have Sadhviji with us too. And we have Luisa Durga Mayima. I saw her, there she is. And we have, I thought I saw another, but we have a panel discussion coming up next. And we'd love for that to be a conversation. So your questions about anything, doesn't have to just be about this week. Your thoughts, your reflections about anything, doesn't have to just be about this week. Your fears and concerns about anything. It doesn't just have to be about this week. And then maybe together as a community, we can discuss these things in a way that is supportive, and in a way that guides us from the external inquiry to the internal. And Suzanne said, thank you. Denial and lack of acknowledgement for the hurtful action is what burns. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it does hurt. It hurts so much when they don't acknowledge. It truly does. But we need to remember that we can't make them acknowledge. And all the energy that we put into trying to make them acknowledge what they have done is energy that we're taking from something else. What are we taking it from? Well, we could be taking it away from our spiritual practice. We could be taking it away from our service. We could be taking that energy away from our capacity to love. We could be taking that energy away from our capacity to trust, to see and to envision a future that is better than today. So it does hurt. And there's a moment where we acknowledge that hurt and we hold, like we would hold a child. And we give ourselves the love and the compassion and the empathy that we need in order to facilitate our own inner healing. We can't look to anybody else for that. If they come around and say, you know, what I did was really horrible, that's wonderful. Great, because then that means that they've had an epiphany. But we cannot base our happiness on that, because they're just as flawed as any other human being. And if we're basing our happiness, our wholeness, our ability to trust, to love on someone acknowledging how wrong they were about something, it's not a good investment. It's really not a good investment. And Saraswati asked, who is my guru and what lineage? My guru is Swami Aryatmanandaji, and the order that I belong to is the order of Saraswati. And so my lineage comes from Swami Shivananda. And Swami Shivananda, Swami Chidanandaji, and then Swami Aryatmanandaji was a disciple of Swami Chidananda, and he also studied under Swami Shivananda directly. And he is from Gujarat in India. And again, the order or the family is called the Saraswati, goddess Saraswati family. So wonderful. So with that, I will turn it over to Jyotima, and she will take us on a journey into the next segment. Thank you all so much for listening and for being here. It truly has been a joy to share the space with you.
Thank you so much, Swamini-ji. That was another wonderful satsang. So many notes again. And so really, really grateful for your wisdom and how you bring these various practices and traditions into our lives in very practical ways. And then you span through a variety of traditions. Thank you so much. So we have, as Swamini-ji said, a beautiful panel discussion now that is really a community discussion with our speakers who will be sharing stories and their own experiences in order to help answer questions. And any questions that you have or any reflections are an opportunity for all of us to learn together. So you've met Devi, you've met Swamini-ji, you know me by now. I'm happy to introduce Nishala Joy Devi. Nishala Joy Devi is a masterful teacher and healer, and for many years, she has been highly respected as an international advocate for her innovative way of expressing yoga and its subtle uses for spiritual growth and complete healing. Her dynamic delivery and deep inner conviction empower each individual, allowing the teachings to expand beyond boundaries and limitations of any one tradition, enabling her to touch people's hearts. And she has graced to spend over 25 years as a monastic disciple with the world-renowned Yogi Raj Sri Swami Satchidanandaji, receiving his direct guidance and teachings. She was also blessed with teachings from great yoga masters in the US, India, and worldwide. Originally trained in Western medicine, she began to blend Western medicine with yoga, offered her expertise in developing the yoga portion of the Dean Ornish program for reversing heart disease, and co-founded the award-winning Commonwealth Cancer Health Program. Her book, The Healing Path of Yoga, and her Abundant Well-Being audio series expresses these teachings. With her knowledge of yoga and experience assisting those with life-threatening diseases, particularly people with heart disease and cancer, she's created the Yoga of the Heart, a training and certification program for yoga teachers and health professionals designed to adapt yoga practices to the special needs of that population. And she is now dedicated to bringing the feminine back into spirituality and the scriptures in her book, The Secret Power of Yoga, a woman's guide to the heart and spirit of the Yoga Sutras. And also there's an accompanying yoga book as well, which won Nautilus Books Silver Award. So Nishala Devi, thank you so much for being with us this evening. So grateful to have you join us. Also pleased to introduce Durga Mai Ma. She is a New Jersey Shore native, devoted wife, mother of 3 girls, and founder of Karma Life Holistic Wellness. Durga Mai Ma is a yogini, intuitive body worker, Reiki master teacher, yoni steam facilitator, and Ayurveda lifestyle and nutrition practitioner, and a chef with emphasis on feminine form Ayurveda and spiritual tantra. She has been studying and teaching in the health and wellness field for over 15 years, with an emphasis on guiding women into becoming active forces in their own healing. And she had the privilege of studying with a number of amazing teachers, including Swamini-ji, Katie Silcox at the Shakti School, Mary Thompson, CAS Ayurvedacharya, and Dr. Zaylen Boyd. And rooted in empowering and inspiring students to awaken their own inner teacher, Louisa offers workshops and self-care retreats focusing on the Yoga Wheel Foundation certification, Ayurveda, Blissful Sisters Day Retreat, and so many more. So, Durga Devi Ma, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And we also had another one of our wonderful speakers joining us this week. And I'm not sure who it is, but I believe you were under the name of SubGB, because you're probably using a thing that I kept on changing people's names. And if you can hear me, if you can unmute yourself for a moment and tell me who is this lovely person that is on Zoom right now, who's joining us again. Click the button to ask you to unmute. All right, well, if you are on Zoom as SB or SubGB, when you have a moment, feel free to unmute yourself and I would love to introduce you. All right. So Miji, will you kick us off with this panel discussion?
Certainly, absolutely. So when we come to a panel discussion, one of the things that is a really nice, one way that is very nice to begin the conversation is for each speaker to share a profound story that helped to establish them on the path. So what is it that brought you to the realization that you really wanted, that you longed to commit to the inquiry that you are currently committed to? And so whoever would like to go first with that one is more than welcome.
I'll jump in. Lord knows I have a big mouth. So I grew up with Hinduism. My mother and my father are yoga practitioners. My mother was a yoga teacher. But, and this is probably anything any first generation Indian child can attest to. You were in the life, but you were curious about the outer life. So grew up with it, practiced it, and as soon as I was free to go my own way, I certainly did. And I was that way until one day I lost everything. Everything that I knew was gone. My fiance, gone. My housing situation, precarious. My job, gone. And it was through that that I realized the value of what I had been raised with. And during this time, I still had Amma. I went to see her every year, but it was not with the depth of devotion that I have now. And I spent years trying to, I'm trying to make it not sound like I was something out of like a Charles Dickens novel, because it honestly wasn't that bad. But you have expectations of how your life is supposed to be. And that got completely trashed. And I love my plans. I love plans. I love making plans. And the Divine Mother loves trashing them. And that was the first real big one. And it helped me realize that, yeah, okay, you can have plans, but don't be too upset when they go away. And it was a rebuilding from that of everything that I had known. Yeah, lost security, romantic security, friendship security. I had to get rid of a whole bunch of very toxic friendships. Had to move several times. And at that time, it was devastating. I was devastated. Everything that I knew, I was only, what, 23 when that happened? So my brand new life, everything that I thought I wanted was gone. And I spent years after that finding out what it was that I actually needed. And that was the greatest gift that I could have ever gotten. As traumatic as it sounds, I wouldn't have changed any of it, because it made me dig deeper into what life could actually be rather than what society demands that it is. So I got to have a full meal rather than just eat dessert and get sick and have my teeth rot and fall out on a spiritual plane, if you know what I mean. And here I am talking to all of you like I know something.
Davy, that was beautiful. Thank you. Nishala, would you share your story?
I'll share a part of it because it's a long story, but I'm happy to share a part of it. I was trying to figure out which, it's so involved. As a child, I'll start then. As a child, I'd see auras and visions and all kinds of things. And there was no one for me to talk to about. So I just incorporated it in and just was fascinated. I just watched people with this light around them, and it was wonderful. And then I got into Western medicine, and that changed everything. Science does not believe in any of that. And I'd just like to give a shortened version of one incident and then jump to what happened years later. I was a second-year student at the time, and I walked into a woman's room who had cancer, and she was a young woman and was 6 months pregnant. And immediately I walked in and I looked at her, and I knew that she didn't need whatever I was going to do for her. What she needed was someone to talk to. So I immediately put down everything. I curled in bed with her, and I put my arms around her, and I said, "Talk to me, what's happening?" And she started to cry, how she had other children at home. And we got into this very sacred place, a real sacred place. And then suddenly I heard my name over the loudspeaker. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I ran. And they said to me, "Where were you?" I said, "Well, I was in room 604 with this person that really needed to talk." "That's not your business. That's not why we're here." I said, "Well, why are we here? Who's going to do this?" And I knew at that moment that I had to behave because I would be thrown out of the program. So I pushed it down, and I knew something else was happening, and I didn't know what it was. Fast forward a few years, I'm working in a holistic clinic where we treated a lot of trends, as we call them now, and all kinds of women's issues, etc. I was pretty tired, and I went at night to eat dinner because I was too tired to cook, to a place called Good Karma Cafe. Right? It was San Francisco, and I was sitting across from this man, and he looked at me. He said to me, "You look exhausted." I said, "I am." He said to me, "You need yoga." I said, "I've tried yoga and I really don't like it." He said, "No, try it again. Here." And he wrote down the name of Integral Yoga Institute. He said, "It's just down the street. Go and try it out." I said, "I'm too tired. I can't do this. I'm working 12, 14 hours a day. I don't have time for this." He said, "Just keep it. It may manifest." Well, sure enough, a few days later, I got a cold. And I couldn't go into the clinic because then I would give it to everybody else there. So I decided, well, this might be a good time to take a yoga class. So I walked up the steps, and there was a big picture of Swami Satchidananda. And I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I said, "I don't know what he has, but whatever he has, I want it." And I rang the doorbell. And basically, the rest is history. I got more and more involved until I became a Swami. Same order as Swamini, the Paramahamsa Saraswati order. And I was finally able to find a connection between what I had experienced as a child and there were words for it. There were experiences for it now that I could actually name. And I've never turned back. It's just been one of those amazing experiences that you're being led. it's not something that I planned or ever thought about in any other way. And then got more and more involved in the spiritual aspect of yoga, because that's what was offered at that time. It was such an exquisite time. And I'm just very, very grateful for someone. I was talking to a friend the other night. They were asking me about my history. And I said, you know, what I got is so precious, to be able to sit at the feet of a master for so many years and really get individual, not just general learning, but this and that, sit like this, do this, talk like this, etc. And so I feel absolute gratitude for all that I've gotten, and realized what was missing in medicine was the spirit. And that's what I've spent the last so many years of my life trying to bring spirit back into medicine. And still working really hard at it. It's not there yet, but it's coming. It's coming. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Durga Mai Mom, would you share with us your story?
Wow. Some good stories we have here. So, yeah, I mean, stories. Well, I'll share a story that I can recall at a very young age. I guess just knowing that, being aware of being different. You know, since I was a little girl, I've talked to spirit. So, you know, not really knowing what that was all about, I actually, I was probably the youngest child that I knew of that wanted to be a nun. And I spent plenty of time as a young child in my living room performing funerals, to put all these spirits to rest. It's something I don't share with a lot of people. So, Jema, she gives you the courage to just, you know, speak it. And so, yeah, those, as a young child, I can recall being very much in tune with, you know, spirit and energy and healing and just all of that whole realm. And I didn't quite know what to do with it. You know, I didn't have anyone that I can talk to, that I can go to, that just didn't think that that was really strange, you know? So therefore I didn't have a lot of support, you know, growing up with that. And so even as a child, I went with the neighbors to Sunday school every Sunday, just trying to figure things out, you know, and baptized and born again. So I've had my share. I've had quite a journey of different, you know, things with spirituality and religion. And not until I got older did I really start to put it all into work. You know, what is all of this about? You know, I spent many of years running from it, which were I call my rebel years, my soul rebel years. And most of those was spent in my 20s. And so then, you know, I finally just came to a point in my life where, you know, a lot very similar to Devi, where it was just, I lost everything. I didn't have anything. I lost everything, you know, and I think I was about 26 when I realized that, what am I doing? Where is this going? Show me the answers, lead me, guide me, you know, and then from there, I decided to put myself through massage school, and I got into doing Reiki and energy work, and then I started to figure things out, You know, things started to come a little bit easier. I wasn't, you know, fighting to go upstream, so to speak. I was kind of learning to go with the flow of where the universe was guiding me. And that brought me to my guru, Swamini Ji, which I'm so beyond grateful. And this is where the tears start. So my first time meeting Swamini Ji, actually, I was inquiring of yoga school, and it was here in New Jersey when she actually had a school here in Toms River, Kula Kamala Shala, right? And so the first time I met her, I just showed up and the door was open. I'm like, this is really welcoming. Door wide open, you know, come on in. And when I looked in the door, she was sitting on the floor making malas. Oh, come in, you know, she said, come in. And so instantly I'm like, okay. And I got right on the floor with her and we had a very, very good, you know, great conversation. Something along the lines of, okay, I've done yoga. I've been in and out of yoga pretty much for years and years and years. There's something to it. I've seen you at a few festivals with, you know, your yoga school, and I was selling jewelry. We've crossed each other's paths at least 2 years before this time of actually meeting her. And I'm like, you know, I'm supposed to be here. Tell me why I'm here, you know. So yeah, and it was just that conversation that I had with her pretty much changed my direction of where I was going at that time. And though I was, you know, on my spiritual path, I felt already I knew nothing about about anything. I don't even know if I do really now either. It's always unfolding, and I'm always learning, and I don't think that'll ever stop or change. And I enjoy it. I enjoy being a lifetime student of this life, and I'm just so grateful for where it's taking me, and yeah, and for my guru especially. Thank you so much.
Oh, Durga, I'm trying not to cry. That was so beautiful. I could feel you. Oh my goodness. Like Durga, I grew up with the ability to communicate with beings that are not here, and not necessarily. I would say that it was more like I remember talking to angels. My mom told me a story when I was little, where she just kind of walked in, she just saw me talking, and when she asked who I was talking to, I was like, oh, I'm talking to Mother Mary. And I would see them as beings. I would see them as forms of light, words I could hear or feel, conversation without words, you know, the sound that you can't hear with your ears. And so I grew up in a very unstable household. And so I think that what I believe is that we're given, like Durga, like we were talking about earlier in the week, like Durga, we ask her to hollow us out so we can receive. And I feel like my childhood was like hollowing me out so that I could receive. And so I developed a very strong relationship with the divine as a child. And so at some point in my childhood, probably a couple of years, I had a stable home that was right across the street from a Catholic church and school. I went to the Catholic church, and I would just go on my own to church different times during the week. And I loved to pray, and I had my own little altar at home with Mary and Jesus and several forms of them. And I loved praying the rosary. It was just the biggest joy in my life. And Jodica, like you, I actually wanted to be a nun. I also wanted to be a fashion designer, but I was definitely like, after fashion designer, I was gonna be a nun. I was very prepared for that. And Anyway, so for me, what I feel like, and it sounds like from like, you know, also like yoga's experience of many of us, it's these small markers that, or sometimes large markers that happen in our lives at the most appropriate times, you know. And so it was always one marker after another. I remember being 12, and in my dreams, I had Archangel Michael coming through continuously for about 2 years, almost every single night. And he was saying, we're going to, you know, he was training me. He was training me how to use the power of prayer to like ward off negativity and bad juju. And he was teaching me how to be aware of my dreams. And so when I was in a dream, if there was something I didn't like, he was saying, okay, well, let's stop now and be aware that you're dreaming, even though your body's sleeping. And when I was 20 or 19, I got pregnant with my daughter. And at that time, I said, I want to know what I'm going to tell her, what I believe in when she grows up. And so I really dove into a lot of different philosophies and spiritual beliefs. I had grown up very Catholic, and I wanted to know. So skip forward until I was in my 30s. So at this point, I have a yoga studio. And I think that a lot of us can relate to the fact that I was on my yoga path, and I really didn't still understand that much about yoga. Everything is very disjointed. Like I'm 21, 22, sitting on the floor of my house, meditating to a tape of Swami Sachinanandaji, not realizing that that's yoga. I'm like, he's the best meditation teacher ever. And I'm taking an asana class down the street from me. So I think that I know some stuff, and then suddenly out of nowhere walks Kamania from Prema Deva or Premahara Kirtan band into my yoga studio. I have been trying to get Kirtan into the studio. I didn't quite exactly understand what Kirtan was. And I'm sitting in Kirtan, and she starts reading from Radhanath Swami's the autobiography of a yogi. No, not autobiography, The Journey Home. And I just had this moment of like, I need to read this. I read that book like, I don't know how many times in a few months. And then it was just fast, like so fast in 2 years. And that 2 year span, it was like one bhakti marker after another bhakti marker after another bhakti marker. And I remember sitting outside where I work, and Neem Karoli Baba appeared to me, and he said to me, let me carry you home. And within a few months of that, I think I met Radhanath Swami in person, and he said to me that I was going to be going to India. I'm like, that's adorable, but I have no money to go. And then it was later on that year, I was driving, or my husband and I were driving to Canada for Christmas, and I was just on my phone, and I've been for 20 years just researching about travel, and I found $300 round trip tickets to India. And if you've ever gone to India, you know there's never $300 round trip tickets. And I looked at him and was like, we're going. And it was within that year that I met one of my primary teachers in India, Swami Guru Shadaranandaji, and have been kind of chasing him and following him everywhere. So I did, you know, like I think with many of you, I have not had like one singular. It's just these repeating markers. Swami Ji, I mean, all of us want to hear your story, if you don't mind sharing.
Oh, I would love to. I'd like to say first, though, before I share my story, that I think that this part of the discussion is very important, because oftentimes students have a tendency to look at their teachers and think that the teachers have something that might be unattainable to them. And hearing where we started, where the stumbling blocks were, the ups and downs, the ins and outs of it all, it empowers every single student to recognize that it's attainable for them too. And that the attainment is not something that stays with us all the time. We're not always calm. We're not always peace, love, and unicorn sparkles. We're not always any one thing, you know? And so I love listening to these stories, because what I hear is your humanity. And what it calls me to remember is my own humanity. And that's really where a gift lies, is in remembering our humanity and remembering it together. So my journey is very similar to many of you in parts. And I think that my earliest recollection of something different in my life was when I was around 4. And my mother was a single mother at that time. And we lived with my grandmother in a town called Manasquan, New Jersey. And we would always go in the summertime over to the beach. So I'm a beach girl. I'm a New Jersey beach girl. And back when it really was the Jersey Shore, before MTV moved in. So we were walking up the street one day, and I had always had dreams and visions and voices, and I talked to the animals and all these wonderful things. And this woman, my grandmother was holding my hand, and this woman walked up and she knelt down in front of me, and we didn't know who she was. And she said to me, "Never let them make you forget who you are. You are not who they tell you you are. You are something else." And my grandmother looked at her and said, "Get away from my granddaughter, you crazy lady. Get out of here before I call the cops." Nana trying to protect her grandchild, But that woman's voice and her intensity and the way that she held my shoulders and she looked into my eyes, and there was nothing violent about her. The words that came from her were just completely full of love. And it was like, don't forget, always remember. And that actually kind of became a motto for me, and something that I often say to other people and to children quite often, particularly newborns. Always remember, never forget who you really are. So some time passed, and I think, Jyoti, you said that somebody walked into your room, your mom walked into your room and heard you speaking to somebody, to Mother Mary. Well, my mother also heard me having a conversation with what she called somebody who wasn't there. And my mother wasn't antithetical to these things. I mean, what she said to me was, you can't walk around like that in this world, because people will think there's something wrong with you. So I don't want to hear this nonsense anymore. Fast forward a little bit, and I was in Catholic school, and I loved Mary. My favorite movie growing up was the Our Lady of Fatima. I would watch it over and over and over again, and I just so wanted to be one of those children, to be able to be there when the mother showed up, and to just have her look at me and to see me, because that's what spirituality is. We not only want to see the aspect of our source, but we also want to be seen by that beautiful source. And the priest came and said, you should not be focusing so much on the mother. That is not correct. Now go over here and focus on the Father. And I knew, and that was at a young age of like 8, 7. And I knew that wasn't correct. I knew that what he was telling me was an opinion, and that there was something very, very off about that opinion. And so I kept having these kinds of experiences. When I was about 9, my mother got remarried to a very toxic person, a very abusive person. And myself and my brother were abused very badly. And my mother had a lot of life issues as well. And I can remember in the midst of a very horrific situation, I very clearly remember hearing the mother's voice in my ear saying, "Do not give up. This is not going to break you. This is going to make you strong. So you will understand what you need to understand later." And I carried that message with me, and it's been one message after another through my whole life. And then, I got married and I got divorced, and then 10 years later I got married again. And I was in the midst of my family and my kids and a career that I really wasn't happy at. And I knew that there was still something else that I needed to be doing. And then I got sick, and they thought I was going to die. They didn't know what was going on with me. They thought I was having a series of mini strokes. I ended up having to get a few surgeries, and long story short, divine intervention over and over and over again. After being laid up in bed for a year, on kind of a dare from my husband, I end up going into a yoga teacher training program when I can't even walk up a flight of stairs because I can't breathe and my heart's palpitating and all these other things are happening. And he said, why aren't you practicing your yoga? You always practice your yoga. And I said to him, well, I can't walk up one flight of stairs. How on earth am I going to be doing sun salutations? And he said, aren't you the one who has always told me yoga's not the posture? And I looked at him in the way that a wife does. And I said, okay, that's your one time for this week. You're not allowed to be right anymore. And I went and I enrolled in this yoga program. And I didn't know them. I had never been there. I had no idea how they taught or anything about who they were. And the program was an intensive program. So it was going to be over like 8 weeks of the summer, you know, and a week in, like 1.5 weeks into the program, I knew this is where I'm supposed to be. And that set me firmly onto the course that has led me here today. Not because I wanted to be a yoga teacher. I never wanted to be a yoga teacher. But because I wanted to bring the gift of the spiritual awareness of the teachings of yoga to people who are suffering in ways similar to or different from what I've experienced in my own life of suffering. And so that was what I set my mind out to. And it was right after that that I met my guru. And it was right after that that I went off to India. And everything else is history, as they say. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it. Back to you, Jyoti.
That was fantastic. You're such a dynamic storyteller. I love hearing your stories. And I think that, you know, so Minji's giving us a peek into her big story and some of these smaller moments, but I know that there's so many different milestones that also, like you have shared over trainings I've done with you, about how the divine presents itself exactly when you're ready for like this next step, if you will. And, you know, I think that the one thing that is, it took me quite a while to understand this, is that we talk about from like a Christian perspective. I think that, you know, some of us grew up that way. You know, this concept of free will and what does that mean and how does it play a role in this, because we have a choice. And I agree. I think that what happens is we have many choices throughout our lives, but when we have these specific moments, it's because we are ready, we've invited it as part of our dharma, right? So it's part of our purpose. And so I could make a choice to, you know, drive to McDonald's tomorrow, or I could make a choice to skip it and instead go to like Juice and Java Cafe. And within the same week, if I meant to meet then my guru or meet the next teacher or find that class and I'm ready for it, it's going to come. And so all these opportunities are always here for us. And I think sometimes people are worried that they're not going to find them. You know, like, did I do something wrong? Did I miss an opportunity? Did I, by doing X, Y, Z, miss the chance to do something? And earlier this week, Swaminiji was actually talking about all these different like professional jobs she had in her life. And you know, my husband and I have talked about that so many times. I'm like, oh my gosh, if people have kind of looked at this, they'd be like, she's throwing spaghetti in a wall. And I remember working, I worked at a PBS NPR station in Pennsylvania. And I remember when I was in my 20s, I wanted to apply for this one job there and get promoted. And so the vice president of the department said to me, well, let me see your resume. Come show me, you know, because it was with another department. And then he's like, and so my non-spiritual name is Susan. And he's like, Susan. And he's like, this just shows like you are a jack of all trades. And I said, yeah, I know, right? And like, it's great because I can show that I'm dynamic and I've got experience in multiple things. He's like, no. And so he's like, you have to show that you're focused on one thing. And he's like, and then you can build up. And so it's interesting because in our culture, right, we're shown that there is one step and then one step and then one step. And if we veer off, we're suddenly throwing everything out of whack. And I'll say that there is some truth to that in our spiritual path to keep focused. But at the same time, all of these different experiences come in because sometimes we're not even aware and conscious of how they're going to be building onto each other. I had no idea that every several years from the age of like 12, you know, up into the 40s, that whenever I got interested and I went, ooh, herbs, like a squirrel, right? Herbs, I'm going to learn about herbs, you know. I'm sure Durga and I can relate to this, herbs. That it would wind up, though, coming back to eventually Ayurveda, right? Which is sister science to yoga. And all of us have these moments. So I think it's important for us to realize the divine is with us every single step. And we get to make these choices as to like when and how, but we've never missed an opportunity. It's always there for us. It just sometimes wears different faces than we can see. And so I'd like to hear about what's the most profound teaching that you have received or learned. And Davy, why don't we start with you again? I hate to put you, Johnny, on the spot there.
That stumped me, because it's just like, oh my God, which one? What do I pick? And I have to think that, and it's going to be very simple, because I know everybody's like, oh, this great scriptural knowledge. It's very simple. It's all about love. There's nothing higher. If, you know, I was doing comparison reading with a friend and a close friend and mentor, and we were going through different books like the Narada Bhakti Sutras and the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. And as we were going through everything, I'm saying go through everything, as that he was showing me things, because I'm just sitting there. And he's going, do you notice the one thread throughout all of these scriptures? It's about love. Not only is it about love, it's about there being no separation between you and the other. There is only one love. There is nothing else. If you take anything away from these books, it's that there is one love. There is nothing else. There is only the love. And you know, people call it different things. You know, some of us call it Divine Mother. I call her Kali, Durga, Krishna, Christ, Mohammed, whatever the name is. Even if you don't give it a name and you say, oh, it's nature, absolutely, that's all valid, but it's still one love. It may have many forms, but at the end of the day, it is only love.
I wrote down, Davy, for tonight to share a quote. It was from Swami Rama, and it was that the most ancient traveler in the world is love. I'm so happy you said that. And Sue just said in the chat, amazing revelations. It takes a lot of courage to be so vulnerable. May Ma always shower her benevolence on all. Absolutely. And I think that's like, we'll keep on going. I'll talk about that authenticity later. But Nishala Devi, would you share with us your most profound or relevant teaching?
It's difficult to find one. And generally when somebody asks me a question like that, I try to take the first one that pops into my heart. Actually, I think I have two from two different gurus, because I've had several gurus. And I think the one that taught me or reminded me, let me say that, it's not really a teaching, it's a reminder. Mataji Indra Devi was a very special teacher to me. She's the first woman teacher that I had in the flesh. The rest were all in books or in mythology or wherever. But she was the first one that showed me what it meant to embody love. And what she would do, it was quite extraordinary. She'd be teaching us in a class, and someone would ask her a question about the pose. And she'd say, don't think about the pose, think about love. And we'd say, what does that have to do with it? And then she would stop the class and she said, yoga is only an excuse to love them. That's all it is. And you know, it went so deep within me to realize that there is nothing else. That's it. And everything else we do. So I'm on the same theme as everybody else, because I think that's what this week is about, or that's what these 10 days is about, is seeing that in everyone and really understanding that. The other thing, the other one that comes to my mind, and that I've taken with me for forever, because I felt that. But the other one comes from a very different, it's a more of a Vedantic place. And I had met this amazing guru in Florida when I was giving a talk at a big conference. It was a yoga therapy conference. And he said to me, please come to India. He said, you know, come to the ashram. We're giving a conference. You can speak there, etc. I said, okay. And so off I went. It was outside of Bangalore at the Vivekananda Kendra, actually. And I got there and I got a message that he wanted to see me. So he was a Vedantic scholar. His name was Shastraji. That's what we called him, because he was a scholar of the Shastras, or the Vedas. And that was never my path. I was always the path more of bhakti, more of karma yoga, service to everyone. So it was a little unusual for me to have a teacher that was so steeped in the Jnana yoga tradition. But I really liked him, and he seemed to think I was okay. So we went into this little room, and there was only one other person and me and Shastraji. And we started talking, and he started asking me about what I was doing, etc. And I was a little embarrassed because I had been working on the heart disease, and then I switched to the feminine. And I was about to publish a translation of the Yoga Sutras that I talked about the other day, A Secret Power of Yoga. I was a little embarrassed to tell him, because here was this great male Indian Vedantic scholar, and here's this woman from America who's writing a translation of the sutras. So he said to me, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, Shastraji, actually, I've written a translation of the Yoga Sutras from a woman's point of view. And I sort of took a deep breath, and he looked at me, he said, it's about time. And I went, okay. And then, as always in an Indian meeting, the sweets came in. And I love Indian sweets. Oh my God, I just love them. So of course they offered it to the guru first, and he then motioned to me, please offer it, because he could see my tongue hanging out. I think I was ready to eat some of these wonderful sweets. So they put the tray in front of me, and I thought, okay, if I can only have one, which one do I want? So it took me a little bit of time to figure out, do I want the burfi, or do I want the gulab jamun, or which one did I want? He's watching me this whole time, and he looks at me and he says, go ahead, take more than one. I said, oh, okay. So I just took two, because I didn't want to seem too much. So I took two, and I put it on the little napkin that they gave us, and then they offered it to the guru. And of course, as we all know, when the guru eats, then you can eat. So I saw him take a bite. He took a tiny little bite, but I took a big bite because I didn't know how much time I had. And I wanted to make sure that I ate the whole thing before it was the end. As I had my mouth full, he looked at me and he said, you like sweets? And I said, Again, my mouth's full of food. Can't really talk. And he said, why? Right? Great Vedantic scholar. Why do you like sweets? I had to swallow really quickly because I couldn't talk with my mouth full. And I said, well, Shastraji, I think the reason I like sweets so much is because when I eat them, it makes me sweet. And he said, that's exactly what the Vedas say. I said, it is? I was so surprised. I thought, how do the Vedas know that I like sweets, right? So he said, it says in the Vedas that unless you have tasted the sweetness, when the divine comes to you, you will not recognize it. And I thought, okay, that's not only my lesson for spirituality, but I just got permission from my guru to eat sweets. But that stayed with me, because if I have a choice, and we all have choices, should I be sweet to this person, or should I be a little bit sour, a little bit sharp, a little bit mean? I always go for the sweetness, because I remember what he said. Sweetness is our nature. And that's how we'll know when the divine comes. And what I took from that and expanded upon is that everyone we see is the divine. And be sweet. Recognize them with that sweetness. So those are my two other gurus that I had. Yeah.
I feel less embarrassed for sneaking caramels this week.
Now, just remember Shastaji's. It makes you sweet. Be bold when you eat caramels.
I like Durga Devi and Durga, my mom, would you please share for us a lesson that's really impacted you?
My goodness. We keep up with these great stories, right? Thank you so much for sharing. So, see, I mean, well, when I think of, when I think of guru, or when I think of, things that have impacted my life, I can't help but to think of children, and doing some of the work that I have done with Swamini Ji for Ocean County Partnership for Children, and just getting involved in doing yoga in the school systems and things like that. You learn so many things from these children. I mean, most of these children have, behavioral issues or learning disabilities. And wow, I mean, there's so many things I can recall that, that I can mention that have come out of these children's mouths.
The second part, I did two already.
Sit back and be like, oh my goodness, they're like beyond me. Of the things that they say. I mean, it's amazing. But I recall one of my students one time, and this is when we were teaching in the school. Swamini Ji started a yoga program within the school system here out in Bayville, in New Jersey, and so one of the students that really, really gave us a hard time in the beginning, and you can't help but to wonder, is any of this information getting through? Is any of this information penetrating the shell of some of these, armor that these kids wear, and to protect themselves for whatever reason? But and halfway into the school year, we're coming close to the end of our program, and one of the kids that was just very challenging turned and looked at me and said, you move in the way that love moves. Out of nowhere. And I was just like, wow, like all our conversations, all of the exercises, all of the, going over, the yamas and the niyamas of yoga, and all of this, and having so much resistance during this whole period of time. And then to have them turn around and just say something like that, it just blew my mind. And it just was like, it hit me, it really touched my heart. Like, yes, we plant the seeds no matter what, even if you're not getting what you expect out of them right away, or if they're not acknowledging you in any way, we're still planting those seeds, and when they turn around and you see that seed come into fruition a little bit, and they just say something that you've been basically saying this whole time of trying to get through the message, trying to get through, and they acknowledge it and they repeat it, you're just like, yes, this is the work. This is everything. This is everything that I want to be a part of, that I want to continue to do. I want to continue to offer. This is my seva. This is everything. And so yeah, so that was one of the things, you know, these children are our gurus, you know, are our teachers in a lot of the ways. And then another thing, which I'm pretty sure it came from Amma, you know, but Swami Ji used to always say, and this really helped me a lot going into those to the school system to teach yoga some days, because you really had to, you know, build up the strength sometimes to go in and work within, you know, that system with these children. And she said, you know, love is the answer to every question. Love is the answer to every question that there is. Love is the answer. And so if you can find yourself doing it in a loving way, answering in a loving way, being present in a loving way, that is always the answer. So that's something that I have kept with me and hold deep in my heart, and I just constantly go back and go over that. So yeah, that's it.
So
Love is
beautiful.
the answer.
I love that. And I love the reminder too of how children are our teachers. You know, they are so pure. They're coming from source, right? And they just see the world so differently. And we've just we've lost or forgotten so much of that. And to be able to see through their eyes is so precious. It's such an amazing gift. Thank you so much. So I'm going to talk about prasad, actually. And I'll explain prasad through a story. My first time in India, towards the end of my trip, my husband and I went to Neem Karoli Baba's ashram, which is in Vrindavan. And it was very fortunate we found it, because the driver was not quite familiar with the area, but he was able to find it. And so, you know, I had no idea. I'm still very unfamiliar with India, even though I'd been there for about 2 weeks. And so, you know, kind of walk in, not quite sure what to do. And as soon as you walk into this ashram, there's a beautiful statue of Hanuman right there upon the entrance. And so this is where Neem Karoli Baba, his Mahasamadhi temple is. And so I'm walking through the courtyards. They're completely empty and everything's so quiet. And I just feel like I need to find this space in this ashram here, where to go. And so I'm walking through the courtyard, and, you know, my husband's kind of like looking at everything, look at the trees and look at this and look at that. And I'm just being pulled forward, and I see this beautiful, you know, temple, and there's marble, and there's, you know, his feet are imprinted onto the marble. And I sit down in front of this place, and I just start to cry. And I'm crying because I am longing for him, for my guru. I'm crying because as I'm here right now in this place that I intellectually believed that I would feel so close to him, I felt very, I didn't feel his presence at all. And then I just accepted that, and I sat there. And I hear someone walking around next to me, and I assumed it was my husband, that maybe he got bored of sitting down and started walking around. He's an explorer, you know. And so I'm like, I'm just going to continue to sit here and sit here and sit here. And then I feel someone coming over and standing right in front of me. And again, I'm thinking maybe it's my husband. And I feel someone then touch my forehead and placing, you know, a tilak on my head. And then I open my eyes and I see this Swami that's there. And then he does the same for my husband, who's actually still sitting down. And then he gives us a banana from behind where the gate is, in front of Ninkoi Baba's wax statue. And then he throws a banana to someone who starts walking by. We spent some time with him, and he's a silent monk, so he's not talking. So it's mostly the conversation and stories are pointing to different photos, and then has a staff, and he keeps on hitting the staff down to get your attention to certain things. And so at some point, then we are brought to lunchtime, and we're seated on the ground, you know. So when you're in India and you're at any ashram and you're eating, there's always some kind of like rug or some kind of mat that's put down in front of you, and usually food is served on like banana leaves. And so we're seated, and from Radhanath Swami's book, The Journey Home, I remember that in India they will not stop putting food on your plate, and you have to learn this like cross motion because they will keep on doing it, and I didn't understand why. And so this is happening, right? My husband's as happy as a peach because he loves to eat, and I'm kind of like, you know, but we're sitting on the floor, and there's this little boy, and he's so funny, and he keeps on hitting the floor to tell them like he wants more. He's probably like 3 years old, and I'm laughing because I'm thinking of my mom, who used to say to my brother and I when we were little that our eyes are bigger than our stomach, and he just keeps on banging the floor for more and more, and without saying a word or criticizing him, they just keep on bringing more. And so there's someone who comes out with some rice, and they, you know, scoop it out to everyone. There's someone that comes out with a dal, and they scoop it out, and a curry, and they keep on going, and they just keep on coming back, right? Same thing. And so when we're done, and so because we were visitors, they gave us like nice silver plates. So when we're done, we go to the sink outside to wash our plates, and the little boy's there, and he's like standing up on a little stool, and he can't reach in. So I'm telling him in a language he can't understand, like, I'll do your dishes for you. And then I'm helping him to wash his hands. And so I'm happily doing dishes, like lost in my own little space. And then out of the corner of my eye, there's like within a foot, this monkey that's reaching into, is reached into the garbage and is eating a little boy's like leftover chapati. And I just stared at the monkey at that moment and be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's a tall monkey, maybe like 2.5 feet tall. And the monkey just stares at me like, oh my gosh, she sees me, and then runs off into a tree. So I get back from India, and I want to learn a kirtan program. And I go to Bhakti Yoga Center in New York City. And I signed up for a kirtan workshop. And so every 2 weeks, I think it was, I had to drive to New York City for the day and spend like 8 hours there. And so our teacher is someone who is a Krishna devotee, and she grew up in the Krishna consciousness movement. And so she starts to teach us about prasad. And so I remember like the first 2 classes, I'm really confused because I'm like, I thought this was like a bhakti training class, you know? And we're spending all this time on prasad. Like literally, like probably like 2/3 of the day was on prasad. And I was very confused, and I was like, you know what though, like I'm gonna just accept this as it is. And I'm not sure how this is relevant at all, but I'm gonna go with it. And so, you know, prasad is blessed food, but prasad is more than that. And so she's teaching us about how to set the runners up on the floor. She's teaching us the order, the exact order of like napkin, like when the napkins go out, when the utensils go out, when the cups go out, when, you know, and then every single order of every single dish that you're supposed to serve. And then how you serve too, because then you have to start serving those that are like the older swamis first, and then you kind of work your way down. And then, and they will normally sit on the floor in their order because they know, but if they don't, you have to be aware and you have to start looking around the room so you can serve them properly. And so this is, you know, so like at this point, I'm like, you know, so then we start like serving prasad, and we each then have to, during the course of this training, like switch, like one time I'm the napkin person, one time I'm the drink person, one time I'm the one that's serving the dal, one time the person's serving the dessert. And so, you know, at some point I'm like, you know, getting like stressed out because I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I mess up and I serve the wrong person first? Or I jump in front of the person that's supposed to do the napkins, but I'm supposed to do this first. Anyway, she was taught by Radhanath Swami apparently on how to actually do prasad. And so she was teaching us in this process then when we start to, when you're in charge of like drinks and food, she's like, you go around and you go through everybody then and you serve like the drinks. And then the next person goes, with all this food. And when you get to the end of the food, you go back and you start the drinks again. And then when everyone's gone through the food, you go back and you serve the drinks again. And she's like, you keep on doing this over and over and over again. Eventually you'll start to see the, no more doll, please. They're shaking their head. But you don't ever ask. You never ask. You just serve. And she's explaining, she goes, think about all the times someone has said, what can I do for you? What do you need now? Would you like more tea? Would you like more pasta? What runs through the heads of the person, a lot of times the people will say like, no, that's okay, or I'm okay, or don't worry about it. And because they feel a sense of guilt. They're too guilty that they shouldn't have like another thing of pasta because they're like, well, I would love to, but I'm a little worried about the calorie count, or I'm a little worried because, I'm supposed to, stop eating that because I made myself a promise, or I'm really inconveniencing them. And so I'm not going to like bother them by asking for more, And so she's explaining in prasad, you as the server are doing a service. You're offering a gift. And she's like, you never ask someone, do you want this gift? You give them the gift. And so every time you serve the lemonade, every time you serve the dal, every time you serve the rice, you are giving a gift. And so you start to, so you're like squatting down on the floor and you're kind of shimmying with your huge pot of dal as you go. And you are just getting the ladle and you're starting to go over their plate. And only if they start to go like this, do you stop. And even when they start to go like this, you kind of do a little head nod, like, are you sure? And you almost can do insisting, But the point with prasad, what I loved, and in this huge long story, was that the Swami at the New Baba ashram didn't ask me if I wanted banana. If he did, my perceptions might be like, oh, this is an ashram. You don't have the money to give me a banana. I'm not going to take your banana. I have some snacks in my backpack. But he gives because the food is blessed. And so there's beautiful verse in the Vedas that we chant before we actually eat. And it's I have the translation I can find later and put it into the notes. But we are, when we are eating prasad, we're actually taking God into us. And so we're bringing that energy into us. And so it is a gift. So if I am serving Durgaji prasad, I'm giving her God. And when she takes it, she's taking in Ma, she's taking in Shakti, she's taking in Makali, she's taking in Krishna. And like, what an incredible gift that is to be the person to serve. And so that's my very long-winded story of a teaching that I love. But I'm interested in hearing Swamini Ji's great lessons that she's
Well, I can completely appreciate so much of what you just said, and particularly about eating at restaurants in India, because you have to learn this, they just keep coming over and filling it up. And we didn't realize he would bring over, we were at a thali restaurant, and there's like 13 little cups on the plate, and then you get a bunch of the breads with that too, the roti and whatnot, and he keeps filling it up. And he came over and he said, more? And I said, no, thank you. And Ed's laughing because it's like going on the 6th time, and I'm like, I can't eat anymore. And so Ed's like, maybe all he's hearing is thank you, and you should just cover your plate. So that was a tough lesson to learn. Such good food. Oh my goodness, such good food. And so grateful for it. Thank you all so much. Wow. For sharing so many beautiful reflections, and as I sat here, I was like, wow, there's been so many learning moments, so many deep learning moments. One that comes to mind also has to do with prasad. But flowers. And so Swamiji was here visiting. This was quite a few years ago. And he had asked Ed and I to accompany him to a celebration for Sai Baba's appearance day. Now, Sai Baba is now passed, but he is very beloved within this particular community of Sai Baba devotees. And so he always proceeds over the Sai Baba celebration for them. And so he asked us to accompany him, and we did. And so we get there, and this is happening at someone's private home, and they're expecting maybe 150 to 200 people. And the way, I mean, in the community, in the Hindu community, they don't do anything small. Nothing at all small. Everything is very large. Everything is very beautiful, very colorful, very fragrant, very, very delicious. Everything is done so beautifully. And so when we got there, Ed was scurried off to whatever the men were doing. And the wife asked me if I would come and support them with the flowers. So she leads me into this room, which is literally all four walls are almost ceiling to floor flowers, lilies. Apparently one of Sai Baba's favorite flower was the white lily. And so just package after package after package of lilies. And what we had to do was prepare them and place them in the vases and whatnot. And we were just having such a lovely time and talking, and they were getting to know me, I was getting to know them. And in a moment, I opened up, the little plastic wrap that comes around the flower. I opened it up, and I got hit in the face with this absolutely beautiful lily smell. And for anybody here who has lilies in their home, you know what that smells like. Well, now, and I'm in a room full of these things, but this was overwhelming. And I got so emotional, and I turned to the woman and I said to her, the fragrance is so divine. And she looked at me and she said, no, it's not for you. And I said, I don't understand what you mean. And she said, the fragrance is for God. It is not for you. So yes, we unpack the flowers, we organize the flowers, we arrange the flowers, we offer the flowers, and we give the flower complete with the rasa to the God. We take nothing for ourselves, not even the smell. That sent me over a cliff, because immediately, the way my mind works, some of you have heard me explain that I'm very blessed in many ways with regard to the way my brain works, because both the left and the right hemispheres are always going. So I am just as logical as I am creative, and I am just as creative and imaginative as I am scientific and factual. And in that moment, when she said that, there were so many loose strings that suddenly came together into a weaving of understanding that it wasn't enough to light a candle. Even if you were lighting a candle with what you thought was love, it wasn't enough. It needed to be everything. Everything about you, everything about what you were offering, everything. You could keep nothing for yourself, not even the fragrance. And it really also changed the way that I walked through life a bit, because then when I say this beautiful mantra, which somebody just posted up here, the Annapurna, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagna Brahmanahutam Brahmeva Tena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhina Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyanam Chaturvidam. That this offering, like, we're just the vehicle for the offering. And that understanding is humility. So I guess the reflection of that, I mean, like, it was a profound moment, because I didn't understand. I thought, well, what do you mean? The flower smells beautiful. It's like, no. You take that because your ego wants it. You know, just like you take the praise for something good you've done because your ego wants it. You know, just like you tell everybody if you go to church or you go to temple, or because the ego wants the acknowledgement. In this moment, there's no acknowledgement. It's only giving, only giving. And then another really important lesson came from Thich Nhat Hanh. Bless him, in these days as he prepares to cross over into Shunya. He wrote a book called Be Free Where You Are. And for years, I carried this book around with me. It's a little book. I think it's 72 pages. It's about this big. You know, it's a tiny little book. And it is packed with wisdom. It is a discourse that he gave to the Maryland State Penitentiary guards and inmates. And obviously it's about freedom because the title of the book is Be Free Where You Are. And the entire book is amazing. But there's one thing that he said that really stuck out for me. And it might on the face of it seem like it's a strange thing. But the point he was making really, really hit home. He said, the idea of freedom will always evade you because many times the human being, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, is unable to acknowledge and embrace freedom because they have parameters around what that word means. The guard thinks he's a prisoner to his job. The prisoner thinks he's a prisoner because he's behind bars. But the prisoner, and one prisoner I think commented on that and said, but when I meditate, I'm free. He said, yes, when you meditate, you are free. But your senses can also provide you with an opportunity to experience freedom over and over again. He said, you can take your senses and use them for supporting that experience of freedom. And the example that he gave was, he said, in the morning, when you have your bowel movement, there is no greater freedom than in that moment when you feel your body has been cleansed and you are no longer carrying that toxicity in your being. And that blew me away because it's so true. It is so true. If you think about it, freedom is a sense of lightness of being. It doesn't have to be some huge, grandiose, I can see the future, I understand the past, I can bend this spoon with my mind. No. Freedom is the experience of lightness in oneself that equates to an openness to love. An openness to love. So that book was huge. And that particular line too, because it came out of nowhere and I was not expecting him to turn in that direction, you know. I thought he was just going to keep talking about, you know, being behind bars versus, you know, being in a job that you feel like you're a prisoner. And then when he came and he said that, it was, you know, I sat with that for a while and I thought to myself, yeah. So in how many other ways do we experience freedom every single day and we don't even know we're experiencing it? Like, what about when you take that first bite of your meal? The very first bite. When you have a satiation of your senses because you were hungry and now you have filled that need in yourself. Or what about the freedom that you experience when you hug your loved one or your child, or they hug you? What about the freedom in that moment? And so I just kept going, and I admit I would drive Ed a little bonkers sometimes because I would be like, see, there's freedom in that moment too, and there's freedom in that moment too. And he'd be like, I know, honey, there's freedom in every moment. Like, yes, there absolutely is. And there's two others that I would like to share really quickly. One is another book that actually touched me very deeply. My Lord Loves a Pure Heart by Guru Mahima, Swami Chidvilasanandaji. Her writings have always touched me very deeply. But this particular book, I don't even know how many times I've read it now. It goes through the virtues of the human being, the potential virtues that a spiritually inclined individual needs to cultivate within themselves in order to come close to God and in that loving relationship way. And it's not any one particular thing that she said, it's more the title of the book, because everything she said was absolutely wonderful and brilliant. But this thought, my Lord loves a pure heart. The goddess loves a pure heart. The divine, your source, loves a pure heart. You love a pure heart. What is a pure heart? But a heart that is capable of giving and receiving love. And that, just even the title of that book, with what she wrote in the book, led me to many moments in my life where I finally recognized where I was resisting love. I certainly thought that I could love everybody and give all the love in the world away, but I wasn't very good at receiving it. As a matter of fact, I was pretty horrible at receiving it. And I probably wasn't very good at giving it either, because you only give as well as you receive. So her teachings really, really caused me to inquire within myself what the obstacles were to the experience of my own pure heart. And then lastly, I think Devi brought up the Bhakti Narada Sutras. As I was thinking about it, the words came out of your mouth. Verse number 6. Yatnatva mato bhavati, stabdho bhavati, atmaramo bhavati. This sutra, one who attains it, and it is that divine love, becomes intoxicated. And the intoxication that's being talked about in that particular sutra is joy, is happiness. And in my life, as I'm sure many of you can relate to, there have been, I don't know, so many years where I didn't think happiness was really possible in my younger life, where I sought and sought and sought, and then fought and fought and fought, sought some more. But I really didn't have a lot of faith in the idea that happiness would ever find me or that I would find it. And it was just a day. And I found this book and I picked it up and I was reading it, and it just happened to be the Bhakti Sutras of Narada. And I got to this verse and I read it over and over and over again. And I said, what is he talking about? Intoxicated? What, like I gotta, and I just sat with it, and I don't know, maybe it was a Krishna Das kirtan after that, where I just ended up crying, not because I was sad, but because there was something in the name that brought me to a place of exhilaration. And in that moment, I knew exactly what Narada meant. And I also knew the importance of surrender. And that happiness doesn't have to find you. Joy doesn't have to find you, because it's always right there with you. It's just a matter of what it is that you're looking at. So that was my long-winded answer. So I'll stop there. Thank you all for listening.
Beautiful. Sue said, I will miss this connection of every evening for the past 10 days, especially the satsang. Extremely grateful to everyone who contributed and enriched my life in so many ways, in mind, body, and soul. I'm honored and humble, so grateful for this experience and connection. Pranams to everyone here. Oh, Sue, that's so sweet. I know that I'm going to miss this as well. Suzanne says, cheers to that notion, be free where you are, illuminating. So I'm going to ask another question, but I would love if anyone who's participating right now has any questions, if you can put in the chat box or raise your hand, because again, we'd love to make sure that your questions are being answered, and continue to share your reflections because they're so important and beautiful to read. I guess my question for everyone is about the concept of trust and surrender. You know, we have a lot of these dirty words in the United States, like sorry, compassion, forgiveness. Surrender is definitely one of them, but on the spiritual path, it is very woven into everything that we do. And Davy, I'm going to start with you because I know that Amma, some of her teachings are about that practice of surrender.
Yeah, so here's the thing about surrender. You know, it's a word that's bandied about in spiritual and New Age communities without an understanding of what goes into it. Because it's not just a word. It's not just an action. It's an entire experience, and it's built on two things: love and trust. And those are things. Those are what you need to have as a foundation for surrender. And those only come through experience. So this is going to get a little personal to me because that's the only way I can explain it. I can't extrapolate or have some like foreign concept. My mind doesn't work that way. So my apologies for my mental failings. But so when I first came to Amma, I was 17 years old. I had a guru. I had been in the life. But she was a new entity to me. I wasn't looking for her. I had a guru. He had passed, and I was still heartbroken. The one constant in my very tumultuous life had gone. He no longer had a body. I couldn't go see him. I couldn't even feel like his wrapping of his knuckles on top of my head for blessings anymore. That was gone. It was no more. So I wasn't even looking for her. And we ended up meeting her. Sorry, this is going to be a semi-long story getting to an actual point, but I'll try to condense it as much as possible. My mother met her first. And at this point in time, we were living in upstate New York. And she had gone into New York to see a friend who grabbed her and took her to go see Amma. And then my mother came flying back. She was absolutely speeding. There was no doubt about that. And because she had gone to see Emma for a morning program. And she came flying back in the afternoon, rounded up my dad and my three sisters, and went speeding back into New York, which is about a 2-hour drive. And at this point, I had it with everything that my mother was going through. She went through concepts like they were cans, you know. She'd drink from this concept and then throw it out, and then she'd drink from this concept, and it had been 3 years of that. And by the time we had gotten to that, I had it. I didn't want anything more to do with anything that she thought. I didn't care. Like, none of that mattered to me. I just wanted to be left alone with my own thoughts. But my sisters wouldn't go without me, so of course I go, because I'm the oldest of the girls. So we get there, and the morning program had finally closed, and we're waiting for afternoon program to start. In morning program meaning it started at like 10 and it went to like 3, and then evening program didn't start up again until 7 p.m. So we had gotten there around 6, and there was a line to see Emma that went around the block, and we just kind of stood there stupefied, because we were just like, oh God, what do we go home? Do we go line up? Do we queue up? What do we do? And then the door opens, and one of the attendants goes, you come in, you know. And you know, when somebody goes, you come in, and there's a whole bunch of people, you're like, duh, me? And yeah, they're like, no, don't refuse the mother's grace, you come now. And so, we shuffled in, was it one, two, it was 6 of us. And we ended up sitting right in front of her for evening program. And even with this miraculous thing that happened, I was skeptical. I was not ready to love another guru. I was still heartbroken over the last one. So it's not a heart that was ready for surrender. There was no trust. And on my part, there was no love. She absolutely loved me. She hugged me twice that day, both me and my middle sister. We both got 2 hugs that day. Back when she would actually hug you twice. So, like, there's no time now. Yeah, this was in the late 90s when she was just getting going, and like the most that people, the biggest number of people we had was maybe 300. It's in the thousands now for a program. And it was an amazing experience. Nobody can doubt that. But like, I just went home and went, all right, great, fine, it's fantastic. A really nice Indian lady gave me a hug. Great. I still miss Guruji. And then, we'd go back the year after that and see her and get a hug, and the year after that and go see her and get a hug. And during this time, we're making friends within the community, and attending satsangs at people's houses. Spiritual gatherings like this with chanting and singing and food, amazing food, and amazing chanting. But still skeptical. I am a skeptical person by nature. I was raised to be that way. Guruji wanted to make very sure that all his children were properly prepared for a spiritual life. So there were questions that I had that I would ask, whatnot. I was very annoying. I was rude. At certain times I was mean, and that love never wavered. And because that love never wavered, it invoked love from me, because I understood it didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how much I was disrespectful. That love was still there. And because of that constant showing of love, trust grew. And because of that love and that trust, surrender happened, where it got to a point where it was like, it was no longer going up to her and going, I really want this or I really want that. It became, whatever you want, it's what I'll do. Your will be done, not mine, because at the end of the day, I know that you know what I need. You know what's best for me. You are my mother, I am your child. You know what's best for me. You know what experiences are best for me. You know what food is best for me. You know what people are best for me. You know what I should be reading. You know where I should be going, what I should be studying. So whatever you need, whatever you want, place me there, I will do it. And that's my long story about surrender. There has to be love and there has to be trust. If you don't have those, there's no true surrender. It's just you're posing, to be blunt. It's posturing, and it'll fail, as it always does. And that's not to say feel bad or feel guilty. We're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. Don't feel guilty about it. Guilt is a useless emotion. It is a paralytic. You want to be in constant motion, in constant love. Love is constant motion, because every moment of every second of every day is love, and it propels you forward. So don't worry about guilt. If you have performed an action that maybe caused pain, apologize and make amends as best you can, and then move forward. There's nothing in it for you for guilt. Like I said, it's a paralytic. It's not worth your time. It's just not. And that's also from personal experience as well. And think I will end there because I don't want to take up all the time.
Michelle, would you like to share a little bit about trust and surrender? Oh, I think, Nishala, Davy, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, now, when I was listening to all this, it's so beautiful to hear the stories. But I can't help putting a little bit of, I don't even know what it is into it, because I think we have to be very careful with the word surrender. I don't think we can just surrender to everyone. There has to be a certain awareness of who we're surrendering to and why are we surrendering and how far do we want to go with the surrender. Because lots of different things can happen. And to be, there's a expression about samadhi that we talk about in the Yoga Sutras and also in the Bhagavad Gita. And what it talks about is there has to be a certain level of enlightenment before you can even understand the Samadhi Sutras. Before you can even get into that, there has to be a certain level. And it seems to me that real surrender is that. You have to know that where you have come from is a place that you are bouncing off from, and you understand that this person, this book, this situation is something that when you surrender, it will take you to the next level. Because if we do what I would call a childlike surrender, sometimes that doesn't happen. That's where the rebellion comes in. That's where the issues come in afterwards. When someone tells you to do something, I won't do that. I can't, I don't care, I won't do that. But if you have the spiritual maturity and the trust in that person, but you have to know who they are in order to trust them. So there's a lot with this. There's a lot with this. I've had many people come up to me as teachers. I've had this one experience, I'll never forget it, and I will not mention the name of the guru because it's not necessary. But I was in a big hall with this guru, and this guru was then giving Shaktipat. He was touching people, and they were having swooning experiences, spiritual experiences, etc. And I felt in my heart, this was not a pure experience. Maybe it was for everybody else there, but I felt it wasn't for me. But I had that pressure. There was a crowd pushing me forward to receive this from the teacher. And I thought, well, maybe it's something good and I can do that. And I got right up to him. I was about 2 to 3 feet away, and he started to reach forward to give me the Shaktipat. I looked at him, something happened in me. I turned and I saw what I thought was the surrender sign. It said exit in big red letters. And I ran for it. I pushed the door open. It had those panic hardware on it because I was in a panic. And I ran outside. And as soon as the air hit me, I thought, okay, I'm safe now. And again, a guru with thousands of disciples everywhere around. So what it said to me is, use your surrender cautiously. Make sure that who you give that to, who you put in trust of your being and your spirituality, not only can handle it, but can handle it with a certain level of integrity that it will never, ever be against ahimsa. It will always bring a certain level of love and experience to it. Compassion. And that's what I always tell people when you're looking for a teacher, make sure there's a level of compassion. Because there's a lot of teachers, we hear it. They hit their students. They do this, and the student says, oh, well, it's okay because he's a spiritual master. She's a spiritual teacher. I think we have to really look at that, really look at that. One last thing I want to say is how my guru described surrender. He used two examples, two animals. He used the monkey and he used the cat. And if you look how the monkey and the cat carry their young, that shows us surrender very easily. So for the monkey, the baby clasps on frontways to the mother and holds on. So the mother jumps from branch to branch, and it's the baby's responsibility to hold on. The baby lets go. The mother is climbing from branch to branch. She doesn't have the ability. So if the baby lets go, what happens? Boom, the baby falls. But if you look at a cat, they pick up the baby with their mouth by the nape of the neck. You see this little limp kitten there. No muscles, no holding on, complete, absolute trust and surrender. That little baby is limp like that. We have to decide, who are we? Are we the monkey that we hold on and get tired after a while? Or do we just limp and let the divine spirit take it where it needs to go? So I think the caution and the surrender have to be married to each other. Otherwise, it's not always, the ends are not always what we expect them to be.
Well, Suzanne put in the comments, she said, yes, I've learned the lesson of discernment the hard way. And that sounds like, yeah, that's what you're talking about, is the discernment as well.
Yeah, I don't think we can, it's wonderful to look at the spirituality and to be in it. But we also have the reality that not everyone who claims to be a spiritual teacher has that purity to them. And that's where our discernment comes in, our discriminative discernment, to really see who's the right one to surrender to. Because when you get that perfect match, the teacher and the student that can and the teacher in a way has to surrender to the student too. What is their personality? Who are they? Can I surrender to them? Or is this something that I can't do? So there's that both, and that when that coming together happens and it's the perfect harmony, that's when the experiences happen, and that's when the love happens.
Thank you so much. Would you share with us a little bit about your thoughts on trust and surrender, what that means in a spiritual context?
I really love that reference, the cat and the monkey. My goodness, never thought of it in that way. It makes so much sense, though. It really does. As far as surrender and trust, I mean, more importantly, I think, there's no way of fully surrendering to anyone if you haven't surrendered to yourself. If you don't have that trust for yourself to fully be in that moment to surrender. It's a very vulnerable place to be, in surrender of anything, So during my first YTT, actually with Swamini Ji, we had, maybe it was the second. The years kind of get mixed together after a while. But we did this, it was a dynamic meditation. I had 5 stages of this dynamic meditation. And so, in one stage, you're kind of just like making noise. The second stage, you're jumping up and down. The third stage, you're, taking out any type of anger or anything that you may be feeling. And so there's 5 stages of this dynamic meditation. and first of all, by the time you're done, you're exhausted, completely wiped out, that you would surrender to anything at that point. But I do recall towards the end of this, dynamic meditation, just being in that moment of releasing and letting go, and completely just saying, in this moment, I surrender to you, Ma. I surrender to the universe. I just surrender, be my guide. And in that moment, I hear a whisper, and the whisper says, I've always been here. I've always been here. I am your best friend. I am your very best friend. And the only thing I can think of is that was me. That was my true self inside, the spirit that resides within, saying that, yeah, you're out there looking. You're out there surrendering to this and surrendering to that. And meanwhile, you should be surrendering to me, to this that resides right here within you. And so in that moment, it was just, yes, and tears, the tears come, but not tears of sadness, tears of joy, tears of thank you, like, that knowing that I had myself in that moment. And so I really truly believe, I believe in it takes that moment, it takes in, surrendering to yourself first. Because you also have to trust yourself first, I've been through a lot of situations where, I wasn't my best friend. I wasn't my own best friend. I diminished the trust that I had for myself. I was trusting other people more than I was trusting myself. So it took a while to regain and rebuild that trust with myself. And in that moment, it was like, yes, hey, I'm home, and here I am, surrendering to me, my inner, the real me, and in that moment, there was nothing but trust. There was nothing but love. And there was nothing but that moment as well. So that's definitely, something that I can recall, as far as, surrendering. But I mean, I can think of so many times where, we have to surrender. I mean, sometimes I just say, come on, Ma, take the wheel. Take the wheel, Ma. I need you. Take over. I surrender, your will. Your will be done, So I find myself saying, I surrender to you. I surrender to you, Ma. Over and over and over again, every day, every minute of every day. So.
I like how you were saying about, telling Ma to take the wheel, like we were talking about, the fire element being related to the Divine Mother, and it's burning away impurities. And so we have to ask her, we say swaha, we're offering to the fire, we're offering to her, please take. But we have to let her drive, not be, backseat driver. Right? And that's why the surrender.
Yes.
So since we're running short on time, I'm just going to quickly share a story about surrender. And this goes along with what Durga was just saying, is just, so there is a gentleman who was told that if he chants the Gayatri mantra every day for 3 years, that it would help him burn away all these impurities. And so he would be able to have this incredible relationship with the divine. He would be able to understand that supreme consciousness. And so if you know in terms of the chanting, is that usually when you do like a mantra, you might be doing it several times an hour, all day, right? So it depends how long the mantra takes you. And so let's say you're doing 16 rounds of japa, or more than that, 108 rounds of japa. So you would be, let's say, chanting for 16 hours a day. And the remaining hours is when you're actually sleeping, right? So how does that work? You're chanting, in this case, the Gayatri mantra, and it may take you 10 minutes, let's say, to do 108, rounds on one mala, okay? And you're going to continue to, and then for the rest of the 45 minutes, maybe you go about your business. Well, you've forgotten the divine, so then you do it again. And you go about the rest of your hour, and then you come back to it. So let's say you're doing 16 rounds during the day. And then the rest of the time, you're basically just, maybe getting something to eat and going to sleep. So he does this for 3 years. And that's how long it was supposed to take in order for this to happen. So nothing happened. So he decided he's going to keep on going. And so he's now on year 7. And over the course of the 7 years, though, because he was doing more than just 16 a day, he'd done millions of times of chanting the Gayatri mantra. And he was so frustrated. And so, because at the beginning, he was told this was going to help. And, and after a while of doing the same for a while, you do surrender. You surrender to the process. He surrendered that at the end of year 3, he said, okay, I surrender to the process, and I'm going to keep going. Because this is supposed to wipe away all my impurities so I can have this amazing awareness of this pure consciousness. And so I surrendered to it. But he didn't give up the wheel, as Durgaji was saying. In his mind, he still had an expectation at the end. And he was still holding on to something, right? He wouldn't let completely go. And so he gets to year 7, and all of a sudden, someone in the village just sees him, and they're like, you're walking around, you're not chanting, what's going on? And he's like, no, I give up. I spent 7 years of my life. I've wasted 7 years of my life chanting this mantra to Gayatri, to Ma Gayatri. She's not coming. I expected her to take all away my impurities and to, and so I could be able to see her and to know everything. He's like, she's not coming. I give up. And the gentleman says to him, no, please, just keep going. You're an inspiration for us all. Keep going. This is part of your tapas, your practice. And he's like, no, I can't do it. He's like, I'm done. I need to move on with my life. And the gentleman says to him, please, for me, one more time, do it for me. And so then the gentleman sits down and he does another round of Gayatri mantra. And then Gayatri appears. And then he says to her, where have you been? Where have you been, Ma? And then she reveals behind her, she goes, behind me, do you see these 7 pyres that are on fire? And he says, yes. She's like, they're for all of your karma. It took you that long because of the karma you accumulated for birth after birth after birth after birth. And it was only that one last mantra that you did that they finally are all burned. So who had the surrender of the story? It was the gentleman who'd been watching him for years. He had surrendered to the experience and it wasn't even his own. And with that, I'm going to pass on to Swami Niji.
That's a wonderful story. Oh my goodness. They've all been, and I love the monkey and the cat too. And I've got that picture in my head now, which is really fantastic. And trust is a funny thing. When I think of trust, I don't think about how I feel about you. I think about how I feel about me. I think about, have I cultivated the strength, the courage, the clarity, and the capacity to give and receive love, to be compassionate, to be discerning? Have I cultivated all the necessary skills within myself in order to hold a space where we can have a healthy relationship? Have I created healthy boundaries? And have I empowered myself to keep the consequences to those boundaries in place, to not be wishy-washy, as it were? Or have I been wishy-washy? Am I weak, and do I give in to everything that you say because I want you to like me? Am I afraid of losing a friendship or a relationship, and therefore my actions are based in that? Do I depend upon you to satisfy me, to satisfy my wants, to satisfy my cravings, to satisfy my need to be loved or liked? So when I think of trust, I think of psychological initially, right? So kind of like, remember we were talking about like there's 3 levels for everything. Kind of the first level is I think about psychology, and the psychology of how I myself am walking through this world. And I love this word, and I know a lot of people don't, but I love this word, self-responsibility. Am I embracing self-responsibility in that I am not putting the burden of what I want on your or anybody else's shoulders? Because the moment that we do that, we let ourselves down and we set people up for failure. Now, granted, there are people in the world who are just harmful and who are cruel and who are looking to take advantage of other people. But, you know, there's this old saying that if you walk down a dark street at night looking for like a victim, then you will probably be victimized before the person walking down a dark street at night who's standing tall and very alert. So if you look like you are someone who can, who will easily trust, too easily, under any circumstances with very little boundaries, then that's going to bring you. And if you are clear about yourself and clear about your boundaries and your consequences, then that's going to bring you something. Obviously, neither one is going to have, you know, always consistent outcomes, but generally speaking, I think that that's kind of a measure that we can go by. So that's like the first level. The first level is self-responsibility. The second level of trust brings us into this really kind of interesting realm of modern spirituality, and the dependency. I think it's codependency, actually. The codependency that so many people have because they're unhappy in their life. And rather than say, what work do I need to do so that I can cultivate these qualities and this skillfulness in order to have healthy relationships, keep healthy boundaries, understand what belongs to you is yours, and not take on that burden on top of my own burden that I have. Instead of that, we do have a tendency to put people on pedestals. And every time that we have, as a society and as individuals, put everyday people on pedestals, they have fallen violently off those pedestals. And it happens over and over and over and over again in this world. And so I think that when it comes to trust, we on kind of the second level is like, if we're talking about oneness and sameness, then we need to look at each other that way and recognize that just because someone teaches yoga doesn't mean that they're flawless. My goodness, no way. And someone asked me one time, they said, Sudha, at that point, Sudha, how are you so calm all the time? And I looked at him and I said, I'm not. Please don't give me that responsibility. Please don't put me on that pedestal, because you will end up being disappointed. I am a human. I get frustrated. I have, you know, impatience at times. I have everything that everybody else has. The moment we start putting people on pedestals, we are setting ourselves up for severe disappointment. We can certainly have social contracts with each other. We can certainly have marital contracts with each other, but they still don't guarantee that our trust is being invested in a way that is healthy for anyone involved. So I think that looking and recognizing that just because someone is a teacher doesn't mean that they're better than you. It doesn't mean that they're worse than you. It just means that that's an identification that you're making. And you probably, in a very healthy way, should not associate that with some kind of perfection. There's a lot more that I could say for that, but I think we're coming close to the time, so I kind of want to get to this third one. If we cultivate the skill necessary within ourselves in order to conduct as much as we can in a given world of chaos, healthy relationships that are based on healthy boundaries and healthy understandings and a sense of honesty and integrity and openness, then, you know, I have to go back to Thich Nhat Hanh and say that the trust that we cultivate within our own self, within our own perception, this is what Durga Ma was talking about also, then opens us up to a different kind of trust. And now the level 3 is kind of an esoteric reading of trust, where we trust ourselves to be able to experience freedom in even mundane moments. To experience freedom in even mundane moments, and not allow that experience of freedom to be swayed by the naysayers or to be elevated to some kind of other thing by the people who would make it into some grandiose, supernatural something or another. That you have enough trust in yourself to recognize the freedom that exists in mundane moments, the love that exists in mundane moments, that you can give and receive love, even in the mundane moments. It doesn't have to always be, a candlelit dinner under the stars. Sometimes it can just be French fries together, and you can have the experience of surrendering to the love in that mundane moment because you trust yourself enough to know what you're feeling to some good degree. And then the ultimate, I think, maybe, is to experience devotion in mundane moments. You don't have to go to church every Sunday and that's where your devotion happens. You don't need to go to temple every Saturday and that's where your devotion happens. That even in the most mundane of moments, and here's one, you posted up a beautiful mantra before, the Annapurna mantra, the food mantra. Most people look at eating as a mundane activity that we must do in order to biologically survive. Our spiritual path asks us to have faith that that food is nourishment that has been a gift from the beloved to us. And the reciting of that mantra is acknowledgement and surrender to that gift. So to be able to recognize and experience freedom in mundane moments, to recognize and be able to experience love in even mundane moments, and to recognize and experience devotion in even the most mundane of moments, and then to be grateful. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Swaminiji. There's a couple of other comments that are on here, but because of time, I just wanted to, Devin had asked if there's any more programs coming up. So I just put in the chat box, Swaminiji is working on a program that she'll share. And then every Sunday she has wisdom circles from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m. And then also there's Kirtan, I believe, on Wednesdays.
7:30. Mm-hmm.
And if you go onto Kula Kamala's website, you can sign up for the email there, and she posts the schedule, because there's a lot of amazing talks Swaminiji does like throughout the year, so that way you can be notified of that. So, and I just want to thank everyone again for joining us for the week. This has been such an incredible experience. I am just so grateful for your time and for all of the beautiful gifts that you've shared. And again, thank you to Swaminiji for offering this and creating this program. And if you're able to donate to Kula Kamala Foundation, it's much appreciated. The website address is kulakamalafoundation.org, and it helps keep free programs like this available. And again, Swamiji, throughout the year, she's growing food and donating into food banks, and she's always a service to the community in so many different ways. So this just continues to help support her mission. So thank you very much for your generosity.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone, to Jyoti Ma, to Luisa Dorgi Ma, to Devi Ma, for co-hosting this beautiful, beautiful experience. To Nischala Joy Devi, such a beloved teacher and such an amazing woman. I am so grateful to have you here with us, and I look forward to further collaboration for sure. To all of our guest speakers, and to all of the Kirtanwala who came and shared their amazing, amazing voices and devotion, and to all you who came back every night to listen, to gather, and to to work on breaking down the barriers of love, to love yourself, to be introduced to the mother, and to just be together. I think now in the world, with all that's happening, it's important that we just be together. So I'm so grateful. And I'll ask Jyotima if she would close us out with a prayer.
Sure, thank you. We'll keep it simple. So let's go ahead and sit straight, close our eyes, and just allow ourselves to be aware of the breath. Bring your hands to heart center. And throughout the past 10 evenings, we have been able to see the immense fierceness, generosity, devotion of Ma, and come to love her in all of her forms. And in that ability to see her, we can recognize ourselves in her, and that each of our forms is as beloved as hers. We recognize that there is no separation between Ma and ourselves. And it's not that she lives in our heart, it is that she is us. And so there's no space for us to dislike any aspect of it, because when we dislike it, we're disliking Ma. We love ourselves in every single form that we are. And so with that, let's go ahead and pray for peace in our hearts and peace for each other in the world. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. We'll chant it 3 times together, followed by Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Deep breath in. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May you have peace and joy. May you have good health and prosperity. And may you have love. Jai Ma.
See you all again very soon. Have a beautiful night.